What's the worst case of rich kid syndrome you've seen? I work for a dentist and her son is a spoiled brat. He was at the office one day because she had to bring him to an appointment later that day. He got bored and went out wandering around some of the local shops. He came back a little while later and, without any preamble, walked up to her and said, "Give me $80. She asked him what it was for and he just repeated himself and she gave it to him. Edit. Did not expect this to blow up. I'll answer a few questions if I can. So, the kid is 19 years old. He was 17 at the time of this incident. The father is in the picture, but my boss, the dentist, is the main breadwinner and disciplinarian of the family. The husband is more like another child and just works here and there and lives off her money. She tries to act tough and instill certain morals and values in her kids, but then turns around and caves to all of their demands. For example, her twin daughters are going to university next year, and instead of staying in a dorm, they demanded a 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom apartment. They refused to share a bedroom or even a bathroom. At first, she told them absolutely not, but they whined and complained and she caved. This will be a 2-bed, 2-bath apartment in Toronto, by the way, where rent prices are through the roof. My boss is very much about appearances and from a young age got her kids accustomed to a privileged lifestyle. She created monsters. Edit 2. Yes, they're totally like Jean Ralphio and Mona Lisa Saperstein. Story 2. I wouldn't say rich kid, but definitely spoiled brat who thought he was rich. Befriended him in 5th grade over our interest in the Yu-Gi-Oh! Trading card game. First time I hung out at his place, I noticed just how littered with stuff his room was. Some even unopened. I showed him some rare card that I had recently pulled from a pack. He got super jealous and angry that I wouldn't trade or sell it to him. He immediately got up and walked over to the family computer and booted up a site where you could buy cards and various other toys and such. Completely ignoring having me over, he's now on an online shopping spree adding stuff to the cart. After adding a few things, he yells, "Where's the credit card?" And immediately his older sister comes running up the stairs to yell, "Kyle, Mom said no more buying stuff online," and closes the website and shuts off the computer. Kyle then proceeds to have a crying tantrum on the floor, and I'm just standing there over him, in shock at what's happening and how he's acting. I slowly stopped hanging out with him until completely avoiding him as his temperament got worse. Kid wasn't even rich either. If I remember correctly, both of his parents were cops. Yeah, so I think it's important to go ahead and draw the line right now that there is a difference between rich kid syndrome and then just spoiled brats in general that can exist regardless of their family income situation. So anyway, moving on. Story 3. Friend got a theater with an arcade built over their family's 12-car garage. Parents didn't want the 5-year-old sister to be jealous, so they hired an architect to design and build her a fully functioning playhouse with a bathroom, AC, and bedroom. Just the tip of the iceberg with this family, though. Update. Lots of comments. I'll try to round out the image. And for what it's worth, no, neither I nor my family is rich. We just lived really close to the family, and my dad and another mother became close friends with them. They were on the whole really nice and innocent people drunken on the spoils of wealth. I can say I genuinely love the family. Firstly, one commenter was correct. This is not really rich kid syndrome. And no, these are not normal rich people. These are ultra rich, probably richer now than they were then. For example, George Bush Jr. visited the family's house to hold a fundraiser for his second campaign. This was not a typical rich family. The father built a mini racetrack for his Lotus Espritz at his lake house. Also built a mega yacht with a garage for what most of us would consider a large boat on it. Surprise, he never really used it more than once or twice. An impulse purchase. The house, more aptly called a castle, was filled with game from African safaris taken in the 70s and 80s. The wife bought a popular fast food franchise unavailable in our area because she didn't like having to drive 30 minutes to get what she wanted. Once when I was swimming in the waterfall pool with the son, my mom called and reminded him that I need to be home for some sports events or something, and we hopped in their Bentley dripping wet. It was the first time my feet ever touched a fur floor in a car, soaking wet at that. At the Millennium, the father was into tattoos and regularly spent tens of thousands to fly the best tattoo artists in the world in from Japan and LA to work on his Yakuza-style sash tattoo. I could go on and on. But the number one thing that I think might qualify one in the family for rich kid syndrome is that the father, who inherited his family business from his father, sold the business overseas in the late 80s. The company was the only reason the town had to exist. Ever since, the community has been recognized as the most oppressed in the state, and the schools unequivocally are the worst. Story 4. Luckily, the only rich kids I knew were the most outstandingly well-behaved boys I've ever met. I was a youth leader in a ministry for middle schoolers, and I think the worst it ever got was them being mildly disruptive at times. but these kids had a literal half-size basketball court in their basement, along with a basement the size of a comfortable 2-bedroom apartment, an arcade, a fully stocked second fridge. Don't even get me started on the house itself and the yard. This place easily would list at least as $1 million home, but they would share with all the kids in the group and never ever look down on anyone for not having money like them. These boys even helped me change a flat tire on my car because they felt it was useful to know how. They literally could probably afford a tow truck and a tire repair all in the same day if it ever happened to them. They were so well grounded that it made me feel like I was the spoiled brat at times. Edit. Looked up the zestimate of the house. It was between 1.4 and 1.9 million, but the next most expensive house I found in the area was listed for 1.4. The average home in this particular town cost between 400 to 500K, so it's still pretty lavish compared to what everyone else around them has. Story 5. I could absolutely survive on my own. My parents just pay for my food and house, but I pay for everything else. If I got a job, I could pay for my food and house too. Said at 18, in the middle of a discussion between two middle-class peers who were talking about saving money because they had to pay for their own college and living expenses. About 5 minutes prior to this conversation, both peers had ordered the cheap dinner options and declined a shopping trip later that night, while Rich Girl was talking non-stop about buying the best/most expensive souvenirs for her friends. Once tried a regular person retail job and quit within a couple weeks as it, quote, just wasn't right and I didn't like it. Had actual responsibilities for the first time. Moved cross-country for an 8-month education course, where her parents pay food, rent, and school. They also gave her a debit card, which replenishes up to $500 when it hits $50. She still posts Snapchats with captions of that broke person life over pictures of her getting Starbucks every day, and insists she could survive on her own. Constantly suggests the most expensive options for meals, activities, etc., and tacks on things like, we can just split the bill. I know you're saving, but it's just an amount of at least $50, so you'll be fine, right? Then gets upset when people can't afford to spend time with her, or when someone dares to suggest that she helps cover costs. Okay, how can you be so delusional that, like, you're rich, but you're also somehow a cheapskate on top of that? Like, take care of your friends. $50, yeah, big deal. Whatever. Story 6. This is pretty tame, but it's what I got. I used to work as an after-school babysitter for a loaded doctor couple with 2 kids. My job was mainly pick up the younger kid from school and hang out till his parents got home. He was a good kid, but coddled and immature. He was in 5th or 6th grade at this point. Oftentimes, he would not be at his classroom when I came to get him, and the school campus was huge. Different buildings, courtyards, playgrounds, the works. If he wasn't at his classroom, I had to comb the whole campus, and he was rarely in the same place twice. He had a cell phone, but usually ignored its existence except for playing games on it in the car. The school was in the city, and I had to park on the street. A couple of times I wound up with parking tickets because, despite having stuffed the meter with enough quarters to presumably result in ample time, the search for my charge would take much longer than anticipated. After a point, I mentioned this to him, calmly asking that he respect my time and stay in a set location so that I don't end up with a $25 ticket again. He looked at me with a good-natured shrug and said, well, that's not much. You can afford that. Sonny, your parents paid me $140 a week and I was in college. I know you live in a $1.4 million house and your dad buys you an expensive new toy every Sunday, but with the money they're forking over for your education, someone ought to have taught you the value of $1 by now. But honestly, he was a nice kid. They moved away and I hope he's doing well. Story 7. I worked as a bouncer at a high-end nightclub. The biggest boner of a rich kid, straight out of Malibu's Most Wanted, gets a VIP booth and bottle service, racks up a massive bill trying to act like a baller. His credit card gets denied and he has to call his dad to come down at 1:30 a.m. because he can't order any more bottles. His dad comes down in his pajamas, obviously ashamed and furious at this douche of a kid. Ends up embarrassing the crap out of his kid in front of his whole group of friends. He takes the kid's keys and is about to leave when his kid makes some crappy comment and goes back in the club. The dad's about to walk away after he apologizes for his son when we offer to drag him out the rough way. He smiles and accepts. That kid hit every door and step on the way out. Not the best story, but was one of the most satisfying experiences working at that club. Story 8. Dunno if it qualifies as rich kid syndrome, but when I got out of the Navy, I decided to use my GI Bill at one of the Penn State satellites. I was sitting in the cafeteria drinking coffee and typing up a paper when a girl sits down across from me and opens her backpack. She pulls out a sandwich bag and looks at it in disgust, then looks me dead in the eye and says, quote, I don't even know why I bother. My mother never cuts off the crust. I let out one of those high-pitched short laughs, like, is this girl for real? Oblivious to the tone of it, she says, I know, right? Then asks me if I want it. I looked around thinking I was getting pranked or something because this crap is too stereotypical to be real, and I just assumed I was being filmed. She shook it at me and gave me a "well" look, so I said F it and took the sandwich. She then pulled out her student ID card and bought a crap ton of french fries. That sandwich was awesome. I think the bread was homemade, and it was packed like a Dagwood. It had all kinds of expensive-looking meats and Dijon mustard. Serious gourmet crap. I know this girl's mother will never see this, but I just want to say someone appreciated that sandwich. So I encountered something similar myself when I was in junior high school, so that's like the age of, I guess, 11 to 14. There was this one kid, and he got this same sandwich. His mom packed it in his lunch for him every single day, and he hated it. He absolutely hated it. It was like a salami and mustard and cheese sandwich or something like that. And every single day for 7th and 8th grade, he gave me that sandwich because I loved it. And he was going to throw it away. So similar story here. Mom is never going to read this, but I just want you to know those sandwiches did not go to waste. I ate them and I loved them. Story 9. This case isn't too bad, and it's a bit funny. I became friends with a kid whose family was really well off. He was a really nice bloke, but a bit sheltered, and university was the first time he really had any independence. But he had very little sense of what value of the dollar was, since his folks got him what he usually wanted, compared to what normal people would spend. There was one particular time he wanted to eat at a restaurant, and he assured us it's really good. So we all rocked up to this place, and the price for main courses started at $40 to $60, which, as a poor uni student, we couldn't afford. But when he realized this, he was so embarrassed that he got his folks to pay for it. He's finally wised up a few years later, once he got more independence away from his family and made his own money, and remains one of the best blokes I know. Story 10. Got paid $250. It was a lot more back in the 1900s. To clean out a rich guy's garage. We could keep anything we wanted after letting him look at it first. He never kept anything we showed him, but we sure did. It just wasn't worth the guy's time to look at this junk, let alone go through it all and sort out what they were keeping. Wife's clothes and accessories mostly, and high-end sporting gear like fishing poles and home gyms for him. And what we set aside for the charity people to pick up. I suspect most of it was picked up by the neighbors before the charity people got to it, but whatever. Among the things we kept, original sit-down style 2-player Space Invaders cabinet. Not working when we found it, but we fixed it easily once we got it home. Perfectly fine pinball cabinet, old school with no digital displays, but very retro, even in the 90s, and very cool. Giant coolers, kitchen gear, plates and utensils, basically re-outfitted our bachelor pad kitchen top to bottom. Automatic frozen drink maker like you see in bars, but they're always broken because they're a pain in the ass to operate and even worse to clean. Several pounds of frozen grass-fed beef, wild boar ribs, and organic free-range venison of unknown age. I would never eat it now, but back then, we did not give a F, and it tasted amazing. One of my ribs had a bullet hole in it that we found after smoking them. A deep freezer to store all the frozen meat. He didn't care at all about the value of the things. He glanced at them, claimed he didn't want them in his garage anymore, and we made them disappear. Then we got fed, and then we got paid. 10 out of 10 would work under the table cleaning up after dumb rich guys anytime. Story 12. Less snobby and more just, whew. Had a friend whose family was ridiculously rich. She was so blind to just how lucky she was. She once left her limited edition Pikachu 2DS on a plane and was able to replace it and all the games she left behind too right away. Her biggest complaint was that she'd have to make up all that lost gameplay. She just kept whining about it. She was living in her own apartment her parents paid for, despite being thousands of miles away, and she ordered dinner from gourmet places every night. She took great care to detail for me exactly what she was having every night, complete with mms and yummies, so I'd understand just how good the food was. I was living in a college dorm at the time, in a town that was basically a food desert. Nothing delivered unless you wanted Papa John's, and the options for dining out besides the campus dining hall were Moe's and a few other places of similar quality. I've been pretty content with these, besides missing stuff from home obviously, until her luxurious lifestyle started to make me envious. She just couldn't help but flaunt her wealth all the time. I talked to her once about it, and at least she was kind enough to stop telling me every dinner, but everything else she said still reeked of how rich she was. Story 13. My friend from high school. Her parents forced her to major in biology to be pre-med when she started college. She made a really big deal about absolutely needing to change her major or it would affect her mental health, so she changed her major to philosophy. After college, she's floundering and wants to move to California to work for a record company. She wants to do the thing in the movies where they get a job in the mailroom and work their way up. I think this sounds noble, if idealistic, but her parents, quote, won't let her. I was confused as to how this had any bearing on her decision since we were already well into adulthood. We were like 23, but I felt very adulty at the time, lol, and she could pick up and move if it meant that much to her. More on this later. Then she gets her parents to give her seed money to start this website. Of course, after like 2 years of effort, that went nowhere. So then she takes a couple of extra classes, applies, gets into and starts law school. Decides she hates it, quits. In the meantime, she's living at home and her parents are paying all of her bills. She's never had a job. Now we're late 20s and she's tossing around the record company idea again. Now I find out why her parents' opinion was so important before. She didn't want to go live in a crappy apartment with crappy roommates because she made minimum wage. She wanted her parents to pay all of her living expenses while she was in California, and at her comfort level, that would likely have added up to about $5,000 a month or more. So then she finally stopped talking about that and started going back to the idea of medical school. We're now mid-30s, and she occasionally mentions having taken a chemistry course or something to prep for the MCAT. Meanwhile, she's never had a paycheck aside from what her mom pays her to be the office manager at her business. And a few years back, her parents bought her a house probably worth $800,000 USD, which she doesn't live in for some reason. She still lives in her room from high school, just throws parties there every few months. Also, if she's out shopping and sees a Prada or Chanel thing that she likes, she'll drop $3,000 without batting an eyelash. I keep thinking she'll learn, she'll get better, she'll find some purpose, and I'm continually disappointed. She's actually pretty smart and determined, but so spoiled with rich kid stuff that the stuff has become her priority rather than any career aspiration she may have. Story 14. A friend of my little brother, who was 11 to 13. Best examples. I had just gifted my brother my old gaming PC. 3570K, 8 gig RAM, GTX 970 when I upgraded mine. My brother was excited and told this friend about it. A few weeks later, friend, I'm getting a brand new PC with two 1080s and a VR headset and this and that. The kid plays pretty much only Minecraft. My brother also started getting heavily into airsoft. He saved up for months and months and bought one of the cheapest rifles out there. He was ultra proud of it and loved it to bits. Not long later, friend says he's getting a full set of airsoft gear with a huge expensive gun and full tactical plate carriers and all this expensive, useless to a 13-year-old for actually playing airsoft stuff. He's hardly my brother's friend anymore because that sort of thing is all he'd ever do. He got the PC, but I'm not sure if he got the airsoft stuff. Amusingly, he actually went to our airsoft field the other weekend for his birthday. Little brother rained a hail of BBs on the kid 24/7 and utterly destroyed him. Was hilarious. Story 15. I work in a 5-star hotel, so I've seen quite a lot, but this is the one that stuck with me. It's about 8:30 a.m., and this mother with her son, no more than 4 years old, walk into the lobby bar. The kid is holding a can of Sprite and chugging away at it. They approach the ice cream display. Mom asks for 1 scoop of chocolate for the brat. Not 1, 4, screams the kid. The mother doesn't even blink. 4 scoops, she says. I sigh and scoop out 4 for him. Not more than 5 minutes later, the kid is back and asks me for a Coke. I ask the mom if it's okay, and she rudely replies that of course it is. Not even 9 in the morning, and this kid has had 2 sodas and 4 scoops of ice cream. Story 16. Had a guy in my sister's year, 2 years below me, make fun of her the first day of school because she had to wear the same pair of shoes as last year. Some of her friends found me and told me she was crying in the bathroom. Mind you, it was her first day of high school. Had the girls point him out to me in the cafe, and I went over and saw this effer was eating sushi, like some real-ass bamboo packaging and soy sauce. Flipped it into his lap and made a scene. Kid straight looked at me and said if I touched him, his mommy would sue my, quote, broke-ass female dog of a mom. I'm a big guy, always have been. I was 6'2", 210 pounds of hard muscle then. Pretty peaceful dude, though. I thought about what he had just said about both my sister and mom and didn't stop till I got pulled off. Got suspended, drove my sister to a nearby city, and got her 2 pairs of shoes. Edit. I had a job, and the car was definitely a clunker. My sister and I weren't that close beforehand, and I didn't know she was wearing her old shoes. Story 17. I'd say my family is upper middle class, meaning that they drove regular cars, had a regular house, but sent me and my brother to private school because of education. My dad wanted the best for us, and I appreciate that he put us before himself. Anyway, I remember we were discussing in class what we did over the summer. Some girl was expressing how her and her family rented a house in the Turks and Caicos and bragged about it all day. When it came to me, I just said, well, we went to Six Flags and spent a week or two while staying with our other side of the family in Michigan, had a lot of fun. She laughed at me and called me poor the entire year because she assumed my parents were too poor to take us on a crazy vacation. In high school, I went to a K through 12, her parents got her a brand new BMW. I got a regular Prius. I was more than happy. She made fun of me for driving that car and would put post-it notes on my car saying a lot of rude stuff. She ended up totaling the car in the school parking lot by going into a pole. I assume her parents punished her and gave her an old beat-up car. She came to school one day in a super old 1990 car, and everyone called her a, quote, broke female dog. She eventually left the school. I messaged her on Facebook back then and sent her a message about how important it is to be kind to others and not judge people based on wealth status. She only replied with, whatever car I drive, I can still enjoy my multi-million-dollar home while you live in a condo. Good luck with your life. About a year ago, she got in another accident while drunk and severely injured the driver. She served jail time. I still laugh at her downfall and terrible attitude. Yeah, it's hard to feel sorry for people like this. Some people are just what we call accidentally rich. They don't really understand the value of their wealth, but people that do and then they flaunt it. To hear that she, not only left school, but got locked up for a little bit, that's very satisfying to hear. Story 18. LOL, this just happened to me. What I assumed to be a very wealthy foreign exchange student, dressed in designer clothing head to toe, at my university saw me studying before a final and asked if he could cheat off my test during the exam. I very politely said no, and he kept insisting that I let him cheat. After multiple attempts to persuade me otherwise, he finally offered me $1,000 cash if he could just sit next to me during the exam, and to look the other way when he peeked. So cheating, but with money. I mean, that's a grip of cash, and I legit stopped for a second to consider it. But I still said, nah fam, this is my last college exam and I don't care if you pass this class. So instead, he sat directly in front of me, and I considered the matter resolved. A part of me did feel bad for him because I knew he didn't show up to class all term. Anyway, I was feeling pretty confident during the exam and finished pretty fast. I was giving my paper a final once-over, and this dude turns around and puts his hand out and says, "Give me your paper, hurry!" I spoke loudly so the whole class can hear and said, "No, turn around!" So the professor hears and walks over to us. I sit in the back of class. He says to me, "What's going on?" I say, "Yeah, this kid's been trying to cheat off my paper since before the test even started. I'm done, by the way." I hand him my exam and he says thanks, grabs the other student's paper, tears it in half, and says it's time to leave. By the way, it was a Film 110 class and the final was 70% of your grade. It's one of the easiest classes if you just watch the movies in class. This kid deserved to fail. Story 19. I work at a rehab that serves many rich clients, and rich entitled drug addicts can be the absolute worst. These people literally have everything handed to them, and this is coming from someone who was middle class and spoiled as a child. But then they act like total pieces of crap, complain about not getting special treatment, yada yada, all while claiming to want to get sober. Even just hearing the word no for them is like a mind-blowing experience. Imagine trying to get them to wake up on time or do anything knowing that they will forever have mommy and daddy to run back to when they F up. There's one in particular who can't even deal with the stress of being in an hour-long group. It's honestly kind of sad. Most of them have absolutely no hope because they aren't even willing to see it. So we try to break them of their entitlement above anything. And before anyone goes attacking me, know that I went through rehab as well, and have been sober for 4 years. So I'm not talking out of a second-hand experience. I somewhat know what I'm talking about, and I'm not here to talk crap. Just saying that the rich ones with private jets are some of the most difficult people I've ever had to deal with, whereas the people who have nothing are somewhat receptive and willing. Story 20. You don't have to be rich to have this syndrome. My parents make decent money for where we live, but at the cost of long hours and being very frugal. My brother went to college on a soccer scholarship to a private university. Scholarship covered half tuition, but my dad paid most of the remaining for the first semester, like $10K. Got kicked out within a month for being a crapbag, disrespecting professors, keeping his hard-working dorm mate up until 3 a.m. since he would play video games loudly, drink and smoke weed all day instead of studying, and breaking into people's rooms. The final straw was threatening to shoot people who were bad-mouthing him, leading the dean to saying he would either report him to the police or give him the choice to get a mental evaluation at a hospital. Parents forced him to the hospital to avoid the massive legal trouble he would be in, and he showed no appreciation. They moved him to another location, but since he was 18, they couldn't disclose to where, and my brother, thinking my parents were out to get him, decided not to tell them, and that after he got out, he probably is never coming home again. 3 days later, he comes home because he was let out and had nowhere to go. Since he didn't contact my parents, they could not put down their insurance, so he amassed an extremely high medical bill since they also ambulanced him around for transport on top of all the hefty hospital and psych ward charges. Once home, his behavior did not change, stealing liquor to sell to underage kids to buy booze, asking my parents for money to buy food, and stealing an extra $20 from their wallet to buy weed, selling off electronics, pretty much just bringing in dirt bags into the house and saying, "Take what you want, pay me in weed." Stole mom's credit card to buy games on the PlayStation Store, and all during this time, he got like 4 $200 tickets for weed possession, many speeding and trespassing tickets, and even a misdemeanor shoplifting charge. Dad, being a good guy, used some savings to pay for these tickets and lawyers to keep him out of prison. Dad at this point falls into depression, feeling like a failed father, and doesn't know what to do. On one hand, he says bailing him out is ruining him, and on the other, letting him deal with it on his own would ruin his life potential to have a good career. At this point, I was finishing college and worked extra hard to land a good corporate job, so he can at least have some satisfaction in knowing that he is a good father. Stealing continues, but he joins a pyramid scheme. iMarkets Live to make money. Crap talks entire family, how we're all being scammed working 9 to 5s, how our bosses are laughing all the way to the bank at our expense. At this time, he, a grown 18-year-old man, still needs money for gas and McDonald's. We never wore designer clothes, but he pretty much forces my mom to buy him nice things so he can flex how successful his pyramid scheme is on social media. Every time we went for a family dinner, he would order steak and lobster to post online and brag about success while Dad picked up the tab. We ate at mid-range places and everyone else's meal would be about $25 each. His would be $60 plus. The guy didn't even like lobster, just got it to flex. Kept up with the pyramid scheme and was up to making a steady $36 a week. Kept bragging to my parents that top earners make $100K a week, and he said in 3 months he'll be buying a house in the expensive part of town, where homes are $1 million plus. Cue him and his pyramid scheme buddies wasting real estate agents' time by getting showings of these homes, mostly to walk around and post videos on Snapchat of them making moves. 3 months come and go, and, as all pyramid schemes end up, he still had no money. At this point, my parents gave him next to no money. If his car needed gas, my dad would personally drive it down the street to the station and put in $10 of gas. Mom would give him $5 for food, and that's it. I guess this was good because by having freedom to move around, but having no money, led him to buying weed on credit from his dealers, to using the few good, honest friends he had loan him money. After no payment to anyone, he lost a good amount of these people as friends. He decided he wants an iPhone instead of our Galaxy S phones, which came out just a couple months ago, so he goes to the store to add it to our family plan. Since he's without parents, they do not let him add it to the plan, so he signs himself up for a $120 a month plan, and trades in his old $600 phone for like $100. Dad is still locked under contract, so he's still paying for his old line. And since my brother can't afford his phone bill, my dad takes over since he needs contact with him in case he F's up and needs to call for help. After 2 more months of the pyramid scheme and a weekend trip to Vegas for the pyramid scheme convention, he somehow managed to pay for himself. About an $80 flight and split an Airbnb with friends. He was still pulling in almost no money, and his own investments led him to lose the rest. After another month of daily meetings at Starbucks to no success, he figured he needs to make more money in other ways. Doesn't get a regular job, so he puts out advertisements to shovel snow for people for $10. Payment taken in advance. Turns out he took on more customers than he could and doesn't shovel all their driveways after a snowstorm. Cue an entire town's community page being angry at him for scamming some of them. Threats of legal action, etc. Dad forces him to go return the money he took for uncompleted services. Family parties would happen and he would talk big all the time. He thought since he was 18, no one could tell him what to do since he was his own legal guardian. Family says he should be more respectful as my parents may kick him out of the house. He says no parents would kick their 18-year-old son out. I loved the look on his face when everyone laughed at him and told him that many 18-year-olds are kicked out of the house. He still drives around everywhere even though he only has 3 gallons of gas in the tank and no gas money. There were probably 5 times his car ran out of gas and he just ditched it and walked home. Me and my dad had to personally go get it back while he just went to sleep. Car was taken away from him. This upset him, and he says he'll trade in my dad's car and use the money to buy his own car, so my dad cannot take it away anymore. We laughed, but in his mind, that somehow made perfect sense. The dealer told him he needs a title to trade in, and that was the end of that. At this point, he's literally out of options, and at the lowest point of his life. Parents tell him to go to the local community college and they'll pay for it, about $2.5K a semester, and he has the audacity to ask, "What's in it for me?" The college is 5 minutes from my parents' house, but he says he'll go if they rent him an apartment in a certain neighborhood to live in while he went, which was a 35-minute drive from the college. Naturally, they refuse. At this point, he tries to make home life so unpleasant for them, I guarantee his end goal was to drive them mad to just give up and buy him the apartment. Gladly, they stayed strong and never caved, but pretty much lived in fear for half a year. By now, he's lost all his friends and did nothing but sit at home. He did get much better during this time, stopped the drugs, stopped the crime, and started to help around the house. Parents want him to sign up again for the local CC, but he refuses since a lot of people he knew from our hometown as well as high school go there, and he's embarrassed about the life he lived for the past year. Doesn't want his old friends to see the successful self-made rich kid as a freshman there. He wants to go to a CC farther away out of district to avoid this shame, but it costs nearly $8K a semester. To put this in perspective, my university charged $8K a semester for my engineering degree. He wanted my parents to pay $8K for community college. Currently, they're trying to find a way to get him in district tuition at that farther away college, $2.8K a semester, just to get him to do something with his life finally. He says he doesn't care about the extra cost. Parents are not willing to pay $8K for his second chance at school since my dad sees an education as an investment and he already proved once that he cannot handle himself. They're only willing to pay in district college costs. At this point, he hasn't had a job in over a year, so he won't even be able to contribute. Having no skills or education means his most likely job prospects are at local stores or restaurants. But who's going to hire someone for a job that handles cash with theft on their record? Yeah, my parents were in the wrong for enabling him, and every time I pointed it out and told them to be more harsh or kick him out, they just said, "You'll understand when you have your own kids." I don't, but I'm almost certain I would never tolerate this. He's much more respectful now and starting to get back on track, but boy was it a terrible life for our family leading up to it. If it was up to me, he would have been on the streets right after he started treating everyone like crap. That would have opened his eyes to the real world much sooner. I do not speak to him much anymore, and try to avoid him. He had it much easier than me, babied his whole life, and never much consequences until recently. Never worked hard, everything handed to him. Maybe not his fault for that, but the situation he put himself in was long in the making, and especially after what he put my parents through. I can never look at him the same. My parents gave me everything, a roof over my head, food, clothes to wear, and a support system during college. If it wasn't for them, I would have never ended up where I am today, and I'm so grateful for that. That what he did is just utterly despicable in my opinion, and I don't know if I can forgive him. Story 21. My visa in China was sponsored by a mega-rich government family. It was a teaching/homestay program. The youngest child, 4, was a sweetheart, but the oldest, who was 10, was a little termite. One memory that stands out was one breakfast he decided he didn't want cereal and asked the chef to make him pancakes. There wasn't enough flour in the kitchen though, and he full-on chucked a tantrum, throwing spoons at the chef. Poor chef spoke to the family driver and they picked up some flour and a bunch of other ingredients for pancakes. Enough to feed a family with pancakes for the next 2 weeks. He ends up making the most beautiful, buttery-looking pancakes I'd ever seen. It was something out of a commercial, and all of this within 15 minutes. Kid takes one mouthful, then decides he wants toast instead. Another memory I have is Chinese New Year. Family hosted a massive midnight banquet, and there was so much food left over. I asked the driver what were the family going to do with all this leftover food, and he says they'll trash it. When I asked why not donate it to a homeless shelter, the kid harks up and says, "The poor don't deserve our food. That's their own fault because they're poor." Story 22. My husband is like number 2 in his company, about 900 employees. Boss's 9-year-old daughter has been groomed to be a golfer, so much so that she no longer goes to school. She travels worldwide to competitions with a nanny and a tutor. Anyways, for some reason, my husband is the only one entrusted to book her travel. Not remotely close to his actual job, but the boss signs the checks, lol. On more than one occasion, he's called my husband at the last minute to change her flight, plus mom, nanny, and tutor, because she's craving a particular restaurant that's at a different airport than where she's scheduled to fly into. Or the time she called him to switch hotels because she didn't like the doctor in the lobby. It was like a Four Seasons or some other high-end hotel. Her dad doesn't blink at the expense. Again, 9-year-old girl, and some of this happened more than a year ago. Apologies for formatting, on mobile. Story 23. The Cook brothers. They were born to a father who had a net worth of about $200 million. When they grew up, they inherited his company and his valuable oil drilling patents. Neither brother has done anything of any particular value for the company. The value of the company has grown more slowly than the S&P 500 since they were hired. Because they inherited this money, they're under the delusion that they have some kind of special value to the world. They've never worked a day in their life, but they insist that the only way to get ahead is hard work, that outside help, i.e. what gave them their fortune, will only inhibit rather than promote success. The two brothers are so certain of the truth of their ideology that David ran for president in 1980 as a Republican. Only he got smashed by what he perceived to be a smooth-talking idiot named Ronald Reagan. Ever since then, they've used an aggressive system of bribery and corruption to build a national political machine that operates the U.S. and state governments much like Tammany Hall operated New York City. So basically, Daddy told the Cook brothers that they were geniuses so many times they believed it. When the harsh world rebuked David, they turned traitor and started bribing people into compliance with their beliefs. One good smack when they were 8 would have solved this problem. Story 24. I had a former friend who had an old cat who was dying from cancer in the leg. Mind you, this ex-friend didn't have a job, lived in NYC in a condo alone that her dad was paying for, parents paid all her bills, and then left her with $20K so she could eventually get a job with the PhD her parents paid for her to get. They paid all her college courses and kept her comfy. Cat's like 18 years old and in so much pain. Vets tell her it's best to put him down so he's not suffering. She opts for surgery to amputate the leg with the cancer it's in, because there's a slight chance that her cat might survive, but the odds don't look good. They have the surgery, but the cancer spread to another leg somehow. She gets his other foot amputated. This cat can no longer walk. Cancer's still spreading, and rapidly. They urge her to euthanize. She spends thousands already on these surgeries, on top of paying $500 a week on medicines to keep the poor cat doped up. Suddenly, her cat vomits and dies on the spot. She ended up spending $14K on a cat that was doomed to die. She then whined to friends that all her money was gone and she needed help. This girl drives a Lexus and all her purses are from Coach. She collects those collector Disney princess dolls and generally has so many things she could easily sell off to make money. Hell, she should have been looking for a job, but she legit just wanted handouts. She lived off handouts her whole life and she just continued living off them. This girl is in her 40s, mind you, and still living under her parents' money. Story 25. I have a few good ones. One is of me, though. Def more of a middle class than rich. In high school, my friend said prom would be his first time in a limo, and I thought to myself, did not say it out loud, I wonder how they get to the airport. Pretty effing embarrassing, and I hated myself for the thought. I visited family in Mexico, and we were going out drinking with a group. My friend said he would pick us up. Well, he just sent his driver and an armed bodyguard to get my brother and I. I asked why he didn't come, and he said, quote, "It's not worth the risk driving, so we pay people." Seemed so normal to him. Next is worse, but not kids. Was at lunch with rich guy and mega rich guy. MRG said he would drive me and asked if I wanted any particular car. I said anything is fine. He then asked, do you want the Ferrari or the Aventador? Never mind. McLaren hasn't been out in a while. We'll take that. Dude's house is $26K per square foot, but he's the nicest guy around. At lunch, RG says he's bored because he retired at 55, the net worth of $70 million, and does not know what he wants to do. So he decides to get into boating. $750K boat, $250K boating slip in Florida, a house in that boating town, and then, quote, I figured I would get a marina. Running that could be a fun side thing for me. Drops $3 million on a marina. Story 26. I have a friend whose family is wealthy anyway, but we live in a state with a low cost of living, and so they're considered very wealthy here. He's a pretty sweet guy, but forgets I can't just buy stuff when I want. We take turns driving to the store from our dorms, and I would mention wanting a new video game or something, and he would say, oh, why don't you just get it? After a few weeks at college, he figured out how really privileged he was. He already knew he was privileged, but that was when it hit home. The sad flip side of him not getting what it's like to not have money is that he also didn't get that parents don't try to buy their kids love. My dad drove 2 hours to drop off stuff that I had left at home when I moved, and my friend just couldn't fathom that my dad would drive all that way to bring me my stuff instead of just giving me money to buy new stuff. I think he also had a hard time understanding why I drove 45 minutes every weekend in the spring to go to college softball games with my parents. He just doesn't have that connection with his. Reading this thread has made me insanely thankful for the way my parents raised me. We're middle class, but never really had to struggle, so I'm glad they taught me to recognize the privileges I have. So if either of my parents are reading this, thank you, and you know I love you. Story 27. I have to admit, it was myself. When I was left to fend for myself, my parents never gave me a chance. I lived in poverty with one parent that didn't even wash our clothes or bedding in the week, and ultimate never want for anything luxury with the other at weekend. With a 4K watch at the age of 14, I was the first with all the trends. I was the kid all the other kids were jealous of, but I was hungry 80% of the time, and neither parent had given me a single life skill or shown me how to do anything. My first job was in a coffee shop, and they asked me to mop the floor. I had read in a book once that someone got told off by an old nun for not mopping, so before the nun came to check it, they would make the floor wet again. I didn't know how to mop, so I genuinely thought it meant that the floor just had to be wet so it looked clean. I got a telling off from my colleague for being dangerous, and at first I was a spoiled brat because I was scared and said things like I've never had to do poor people work and I wasn't brought up to do these things. But she was so kind to me. She saw right through it, and I had to explain I had no idea how to do any of these things they were asking me, like wipe a table or use a dustpan and brush, change a bin, wash my uniform, wash up, get the bus home, figure out the bus timetable. The words that came out of my mouth shocked her, and she gave me secret lessons while nobody was around. Can't imagine what she must have thought of me, but she only ever praised me and made me feel proud of my mopped floor and shiny clean tables. When I left, I was the manager. I don't know where she ended up, but I will always be grateful for her bringing me down to earth. Story 28. I knew a kid who was around 12, who always, and I mean always, carried an extra $500 plus on him in a special slot in his wallet, just in case he got mad and broke his phone while he was with his friends, so he could go buy another. He was a friend of my stepbrother, and I must have seen him break his phone about 9 times in a single year, once because he got frustrated playing some Facebook app game. His mom always made sure he had that extra money on him. This sounds stupid as F, and that's 'cause it is. I once drove my bro and his friends, with this kid in the mix, to get some food as part of my bro's B-Day. This kid's mom knew we wouldn't be going to get food where the kids wanted, which usually always meant a fast food joint. Kid's mom gave him $400 because she wasn't sure how much food at a fast food place cost. This was in Rhode Island, by the way, and this prick didn't buy lunch for anyone but himself. We all could have had a 4-course meal at a steak joint and had enough left over to rent out a theater for just us for a few movies. Also, one time he dropped 5 $50 bills out of his bag one time at our house. I kept it, and he never noticed. It was like if I dropped a few pennies. I wouldn't care or even notice. Got my rats a huge-ass rat mansion. Not sorry, but this was years back. Story 29. In my first year at university, my flat was flooded in the first week, so I was temporarily transferred to one of the posher halls of residence on campus. Amongst others, it boasted home to the children of politicians, TV stars, and royalty from the UK and abroad. One such kid, connected to some obscure arm of Indian royalty, was experiencing rather a hard time of it. These halls had everything delivered on a platter for the residents. Rooms were cleaned, laundry collected, and meals were provided 6 days a week. Only on Sunday did the residents need to fend for themselves. And every Sunday, this young lady had a freaking meltdown to the extent that it became a spectator sport. Even after I'd moved back to my crappy flat, I'd pop over to my friends there for lunch, or just a brew, just to catch a glimpse of the hilarity that ensued. She demanded one of the residents make her some tea, then responded by throwing her crockery at them when they told her in the most Mancunian way ever exactly where she could shove her teapot. She once spent an hour waiting for her toast, not realizing that she had to push the thing down. She called campus security because someone was cooking food that made her hungry but would not share it, and many more. But then it stopped. Peace reigned every Sunday, but she seemed as feckless as ever. It turned out that a rather enterprising resident had offered to spend the day with her servant for €500 a day. That arrangement lasted the remainder of the year. For making tea, toast, and such, like this lad managed to pay off his tuition fees, and buy a few rounds. With money to spare, and she didn't even bat an eyelid at the expense. Story 30. I used to work in a manufacturing company where the CEO/owner decided to retire and sell the business. A few weeks later, an early 20s guy shows up and makes the managers tell everyone that he's the new owner. Turned out, his dad bought the business for him. Since the company was coasting on the previous owner's success, the problems didn't start to arise until a year later. In the meantime, the only work he did was buying a pool table and a gym set for the break room and a large TV for his office. When it came time to renew some clients' contracts, he lost nearly 40% of them by charging some almost double since he believed they were, quote, ripping us off. Along with other terrible decisions, the company was on the brink of failure until his dad stepped in and hired a VP to run the company. We also heard a screaming match between him and his dad once. That was frightening. Story 31. My old friend from grade school. Not even a rich family, but he was spoiled. Back in grade school, she was a pretty unfortunate-looking girl, constantly bullied. I befriended her because I knew the pain of being picked on relentlessly. Gotta stick together with those other bullied kids and help each other. Anyway, her parents coped with her bullying by buying her whatever she wanted. Her parents had one vehicle, 3 jobs, 3-bedroom home, 1 bathroom, not wealthy or well off at all, very lower middle class. As she grew older, she and I drifted apart due to her excessive want behavior. She wanted a cell phone. This was around 2005, so they were expensive and not even fun like smartphones now. Instead, her parents got her her own phone line. She had her own house phone. For Christmas one year, she calls me up and is upset. I ask her what's the matter. She says, I didn't get anything I wanted. I told her I was sorry to hear that and asked her what she did get. Well, I got some clothes, 3 CDs, a movie, and some posters. I told her that those sounded like things she asked for. She then said, well, yeah, but I didn't get the laptop I wanted, or the new TV, or the cell phone I asked for. My parents don't care about me. My dad worked 2 jobs at the time, and her mom worked 2 jobs at the time, just to afford ends meet and spoil her with goodies to keep her happy. We weren't friends for very long after that. She became a massive female dog, selfish, egotistical, kept starting drama but claimed she hated drama. That type of girl. Haven't spoken to her in years. Hope she's doing well. Last I heard, she had a meltdown on Instagram over some guy claiming he could read more books in a year than she could, to which she said something to the effect of, well, I'd have more time if I didn't have a boyfriend who beat me until I miscarried. Thanks, a-hole. Yeah, I'm glad I hopped off that train when I did. Story 32. I hope this doesn't get buried. It's a good story, if a little long. Not super relevant to the post, as the man was not out of touch, but I think you'll all like it. So I recently left in-home healthcare, due to not being able to lift on people anymore. I'm going to tell the story a little vaguely because of HIPAA and all that, so I don't accidentally identify the man. For my last client, I was caring for this rags to riches guy with a medical issue. He grew up not exactly poor, but definitely not well off. He did well in sports and school, got scholarships, graduated, started a business. His business became the biggest business in our sleepy little town. He thrived. He started a collection of expensive things that he would restore and sell, sometimes keeping his favorite items. This became his second job, but more like incredibly lucrative hobby. He retired at 60 from the business when he became ill. Insert me into the story. I go into this man's large but modest house. I'm shown his multi-million-dollar collection. I'm literally amazed and drool a little. I'm offered twice the weekly salary that I requested initially. I'm told that he goes to the same fast food place for lunch every day and is part of my job to take him there, and he can be a little unruly, hence the extra money. This man, in his adorable humble richness, pays for our $20 worth of fast food every day with a black card. Yes, the black card, the Amex Centurion card. He finds it highly amusing when the place has a new hire, and their eyes get wide when I pull it out of his wallet for him. I'm then told by the wife that when I take him out and about for entertainment, I'm to exclusively use the black card for purchases, including my own. We're shopping and I want a shirt? Use the card. She trusts me to not take advantage, and I never did for the whole year I cared for this man. He became so ill that he was beyond my training and capabilities, so I had to leave. But I'll never forget buying fast food and Twizzlers with a effing black card. Story 33. Elon Musk. Rich man-child can't take no for an answer. Situation, July 2018. 12 Thai kids and their football coach trapped in deep cave. Water levels rising in cave with miles of very narrow passages, much of which is totally underwater. Many kids can't swim and all have no scuba experience. Highly skilled military marine diver has already died placing oxygen tanks along cave route. Elon Musk builds mini submarine designed to hold a child. Also builds a similar inflatable sub. Published whole process on Twitter. Goes to Thailand to coordinate with rescue team. He's reported to be in the way and a distraction, e.g. signing autographs and taking selfies. Meanwhile, in Thailand, 8 out of the 12 kids have been rescued. Divers and rescue coordinators decide not to use Musk creations due to impracticality. After the rescue supervisor said mini-sub was impractical in the circumstance involved. Cave diver who found the kids had 6 years experience diving in the cave, said it had no chance of working as it was too rigid to get around corners, said it wouldn't have gotten 50 meters into the cave. Musk said leader of diving team had told him to complete the build. Everyone. This is just a PR stunt for Musk and Tesla. Diver says it wouldn't have worked. Musk said he doesn't know what he's talking about and can, quote, stick sub where it hurts. Musk calls driver Predator Guy on Twitter based on no evidence whatsoever. Massive backlash ensues. Musk deletes tweet. Tesla shares fall 4%. Musk apologizes, but only after insistence on this by Tesla investors. A month later, Musk doubles down, saying indecision on suing him is proof of Diver's guilt. Diver's lawyer produces proof of case building the next day. September 5th, Musk angrily tells BuzzFeed journalists to, quote, stop defending child essayers, and says he hopes the Diver sues him. Later, Diver announces lawsuit for defamation seeking $75,000 in the US and intends to file similar lawsuit in the UK. The Diver is British. Court date set for October 22nd, 2019. Story 34. This is a good story, TLDR at the end. I work in retail and this guy comes in, early 20s I'd say, wearing the typical rich private school kid getup, and he came to the desk I was working at, asked me to look up a car part and see if we had it in stock. So I asked him what kind of car he had, and he said, it's really expensive, you've probably never heard of it. He had a McLaren P1. Needless to say, I've heard of it and started asking him questions about where he got it and all that, since we don't have many car dealerships in my town. He said he got it custom made and shipped all the way out to him. Anyway, I looked up the part he said he needed, and my store and all the other stores in the area didn't have it in stock because, well, it's a multi-million-dollar car. He ended up getting really mad and started yelling at me, saying it was my fault we didn't have the part and crap like that. I just said, I've done everything I can. Unfortunately, I can't get one for you. You might have to talk to McLaren directly, seeing as you got it custom built. He ended up storming off, and while he was leaving, he said, you know what? I'll just get my dad to buy me another one. I don't like the color of the one I have anyway. Story 35. My friend, whose standards are over the roof, always had this simple-looking pen, always clipped on his pocket. Me, how much is that? Friend, around 150 pesos. I was shocked. 150 pesos is like half my weekly allowance, and it's a big sum of money for those who lived in the Philippines. I did not know that a simple-looking pen cost so much. One day at lunch, he told me he lost the pen in homeroom, and in our homeroom, if you lost one, you'll never see it again, because of our classmates that are too broke to buy a pen but spends almost hundreds on in-game purchases. I study in a private school, scholar of the government. Most of my classmates are rich enough. I tried looking for it so he won't have to spend another $150 for his pen. No luck. He got no pen for the rest of the day, but I lent him one cheap-ass pen that does the same. The next day, he came to class with 3 of the same pen he lost. I asked why, and he said, in case I lose it again, I don't want to have to go to the supply store to buy another one. It's a tiring job to drive and buy that thing. Indeed, he is some rich-ass kid. He has over 50,000 pesos for his monthly allowance, and he always goes to school with some expensive car. Another, he invited our squad for a game in his crib while his parents were away. As soon as we sat on the couch, he threw bags of chips, those big sizes, and told us to eat. The damn kid don't know how to cook, but when another friend asked for water, he opened the fridge, we're allowed to do so because we're his only friends, and found bags of fresh produce. That friend asked the rich kid on what is the purpose of those, and the rich kid said, Mom was too lazy to cook, that's why. The friend who opened the fridge offered to cook good food instead of those bags of chips. We ended up eating pancit, those noodles that you buy like Chinese takeouts. Minutes later, the rich kid complained. This is way better than the Chinese takeout we used to buy, he said. Nonetheless, he got that syndrome but immerses himself into the reality of his lower class friends. We also taught him the practicalities that he basically used every day of his life as he was not taught at an early age. This was in senior year. Story 36. Don't know the family, but it surely does piss me off. I was in China for a little while, went to eat at this Chinese restaurant with my mates. Across the table sat a family of 5, 2 parents and 3 kids. They looked pretty well off. Dad wore a golden Cartier, and the kids wore Gucci stuff, ages about 13, 16, and 19. So one of the sons, the youngest, was pretty effing fussy. When the waiter served the napkins, his wasn't properly folded, so he immediately demanded the waiter to fold it perfectly for him. Granted, he got what he wanted. Another waiter came to jot down the order, and as he was writing the stuff down, the son literally told him, "Ew, I hate your handwriting. Did you even go to a proper school that taught you how to write?" I understood Mandarin, so I was indeed shocked. Fast forward about 10 minutes later, the same dude who folded his napkin came to lay the dishes on the table. I was watching from a fair distance. I wanted to see what the hell he was going to fuss about next. He took one bite of his fried rice, poked his fork around, and then he fished out something I couldn't see. His face went red, and he literally raged out on the poor waiter. "A piece of hair?" he howled. The father calmed him down in a way, saying, "It's okay, buddy, I got this." Dad ordered the same dish, stared at the waiter's name tag, and nodded at him sternly, so me and my mates waited because we knew they were definitely up to some crap. The new fried rice came, but instead from a waitress. Dad put his hand up, gestured for her to stop. He said, "Call Ming," the waiter's name. Ming came, his face super annoyed. The dad shot him a death glare, grabbed the plate of fried rice from the waitress, and poured it over Ming's effing head. "Don't you dare give me faces because of your crappy service." I had enough, so I left my seat and went up to the dad, and I told him off in English. We left shortly afterwards. Yeah, I mean, that's assault. If you're dumping rice on someone's head, I don't care if I'm on the clock working or not. You do that to me, we're throwing hands, we're fighting. Super disrespectful, screw that guy. Story 37. This might not be exactly what OP is looking for here, but I think it's relevant nonetheless. My younger self is my example. My family wasn't exactly rich by most standards, and many of my friends were probably had far worse rich kid syndrome than I did, but I definitely still had a form of it. I honestly never understood that people had legitimate struggles, legitimate possibilities of not being able to pay their bills, or that their normal way of life could be threatened. I always just assumed things worked out, somehow, no matter what. I grew up thinking I was poor. I honestly thought we lived on the low end of the economic spectrum. I thought there was no one poorer than us. My parents owned 2 homes, rented one out. We lived in a beautiful neighborhood in the nice area of town. We always had the same amount of cars as drivers. My sisters shared a room when they were little, but only so my dad could have an office. And once they were a little older, we all had our own rooms. We always had full bellies and home-cooked meals, and each kid got around 25 gifts on Christmas. Most were small, but still. I heard my parents get worried about money from time to time, but I always assumed everything worked out for everyone because it always worked out for us. It never affected our lives. Nothing ever changed, not even our annual family reunions, which had to have costed upwards of $5,000 a trip. This, coupled with the schools we went to, made me think the way I did. My parents paid for 3 kids to go to a private school that costed around $15,000 a year, per kid. The caliber of people around us is what made me feel poor. We went to Bishop Gorman High School in Las Vegas. They have the best sports teams and sporting amenities in the country, and were supported by the most powerful families in Las Vegas, so anyone who's anyone sent their kids there. A lot of celebrities would move to Vegas just to send their kids there so they could be groomed into professional athletes. It's crazy how many pro athletes come from that school. Everyone around me was millionaires or billionaires. I never really knew anyone poorer than I was because our elementary school was on the same caliber as our high school. I realize now that we were actually upper middle class. My parents were on the 6-figure spectrum. The only reason my parents ever did have money concerns was because of the importance they put on our education and how much they paid for it. It wasn't until effing college that I realized how wrong and truly ignorant I was. I saw that most people were less fortunate than me. It effing blew my mind. It was like opening a door you never even knew was there, that exposed a whole other section of your house. It really made me realize how easy it is to be ignorant of other people's struggles. You could be a perfectly decent person and still be literally incapable of even realizing you're ignorant of someone's differences and or hardships. Edit. Reorganize 2 subjectively questionable sentences in my long, hastily written story to hopefully appease the grammar Nazi. So sorry to have subjected you to such horrors, mein Führer. Look, not to knock down the 4th wall or anything, but I think the only person that really cares about your grammar errors is me, the narrator that has to read this stuff. So yeah, I appreciate you cleaning that up. Moving on. Story 38. A friend of mine whose parents lease her a new vehicle every year, pay her rent at her apartment, give her an allowance every month, pay for her insurance, and gave her a gas card and credit card which they pay that she can use for whatever she wants, is always saying things like, if I can make it on what I get paid, she's in sales and makes about $30K a year, but her parents give her about twice that a year, and I pay all my bills, then no one has an excuse, etc. Hell, her parents recently bought her a huge house, 4K square feet, paid for it up front, in a very nice neighborhood. She acts like she's paying for everything herself, but those closest to her know the truth. She lived on my couch for a year, 4 or 5 days a week, never offered anything for the food she ate or anything else. I keep my place as cold as possible, so I would not expect her to help pay for that, but she wanted steak every night and so on. Her mom actually found out and sent me a Visa gift card with a lot of money on it to pay for her food. I've known the mom and the woman for over 20 years. She was staying with me because she'd been S8 at her place and did not want to go back, so I understand that. But to live there and just assume I would cater to her? She's oblivious to those who have nothing. She just does not understand why they cannot just get money, and she refuses to admit she's rich. Story 39. Not the worst by far, but the saddest case of rich kid syndrome I've seen was when I was babysitting for a couple of kids. These kids had everything a kid could ever want, plus some. I took them out to go swimming in their Olympic-sized pool as we watched their ponies running around the field, so the maid could clean the house. The older girl was telling me how their mom had gotten mad at the younger sister earlier in the week because she wanted to pierce her ears for these diamond earrings she had gotten for her pictures, but the little girl had been terrified and wouldn't sit still enough to get her ears pierced. One of the girls started crying and asked her what was wrong. She said she wished her mom and dad would spend time with her like I did. Trying to soothe her, I explained that they were always working so she could have her ponies and pool and vacation houses and all her toys, etc. They weren't really working at the time, just out with friends for the day. She then told me that then she wished they were poor and her mom and dad would spend time with her instead. I promised myself right then and there that when I had kids, I would never spend more time at my job than with my children, even if they don't get the nicest clothes or latest technological gadgets. Story 40. I'm a Navy brat, and my family was once stationed in Norwich, Vermont, across the river from Hanover, New Hampshire, which is home to none other than Dartmouth College. I went to a couple years of middle school, not a stone's throw from the college campus. Our cafeteria offered vegan options, rotating specials, falafel bar, smoothies, not to mention just the regular school lunch options. We didn't receive grades in the typical A through F format. Rather, it was 1 to 4, and broken down into subcategories within each subject, to avoid shame over poor grades. I went to school with kids named Gray, Phoenix, and Lion. Physical education electives included rock climbing, snowshoeing, cross-country skiing, horseback riding, and the full zipline/ropes course spreading across the back half of the property. Also, a full woodworking shop. The real shocker was when summer vacation rolled around and learned that rich kids actually go away for the summer and do things like visit the Swiss Alps, go to circus camp, or just hang out on a private island somewhere. They were mostly nice kids, but they didn't realize how lucky they were. It was truly a culture shock for 13-year-old me. ETA, Francis C. Richmond Middle School for anyone familiar with the area. Story 41. Okay, so this will probably be small. I shared this on another question about what made your crush unattractive. Anyways, I was seeing this guy, and we were 17. We were quite different. I came from a home with a single mom where we barely had any money. We couldn't afford anything except electricity and rent. The guy, we'll call him Jake, was from a family with a good amount of money. He was given $150 for allowance, even though he did absolutely no chores, and his mom was basically his maid. Now, Jake wanted new shoes. Didn't need them or anything, he was just tired of his, I guess. He decided to tell his mom that he needed new basketball shoes, which he didn't really need. She was annoyed, but gave him $100. Jake starts whining like a kid who got the wrong toy for Christmas and says he needs $250 because that's how much the shoes he wants are. His mom said no, that $100 is plenty to buy a pair of shoes. He starts throwing a fit and fighting with his mom, demanding an extra $150 for shoes. Keep in mind, I come from a family with basically no money, and I'm standing next to him just frozen in shock at how he could be so childish over this. I almost grabbed the money and said, "Fine, if you don't want it, I'll gladly go fill my closet with clothes that fit or buy a bra my actual size." I didn't, but I really wish I did. His mom noticed the way I looked, and she tried to calm him down, but I could tell she felt bad for me seeing him throw this fit, knowing damn well that if it had been me, I would have been extremely grateful and probably would have gotten more than one pair of shoes. Yeah, we're not seeing each other anymore. He also decided to tell his parents over a month after we started talking that I was telling everyone at his school that he wanted to SA me, which I was just appalled at. 1, I was already out of high school and in college, and he was a junior. 2, I never went to his school district and only ever knew one person who went there, but they had already graduated. Lastly, I was already in a new relationship with my now husband. As I'm writing this, I just remembered something. The day he told his mom that I was spreading those rumors, he had hit up my best friend knowing full well who she was, because he had even spoken to us before asking to hang out and cuddle and crap. Of course, my best friend is the crap and turned his ass down when he started bashing me in my new relationship. She stood up for us and defended him and I. He was angry at me because my best friend wouldn't F him and chose our friendship over him. Story 42. This is a story my cousin likes to tell about herself, and she doesn't understand how entitled it makes her sound. She and her husband took their family, they have 3 boys, to Austria for a ski holiday. They went with another family that also had some kids. I think all the kids ranged in age between 8 and 13. They all stayed at a hotel/lodge that serves all your meals in the dining room and gives you an assigned table for the week. And the adults deliberately put all their kids at a different table in a different part of the dining area, around a corner or something, so that they were out of sight and out of earshot. After a day or two, a person from another family that had a table near where the kids' table was came over to the adults to tell them that their kids were misbehaving wildly, and could they please make them behave so as not to ruin the dining experience for the other guests. My cousin responded to this person, "If you don't like the way our kids are behaving, it's going to be that way for a week, so you should request a table in a different part of the dining room." Story 43. An old boss of mine had recently taken over a company I was working for a few years back. This was right when Obamacare was going into effect, so literally everyone had to enroll in healthcare or get a fee. This guy has never had to work a hard day in his life. His dad's the owner of the Philadelphia Flyers, and has jumped from business to business with daddy's money, buying out companies for ventures he was interested in. Now that there's a bit of backstory, at one point, the managers are getting everyone enrolled and he starts to get annoyed with the entire situation. Stops everything and calls a meeting with all the managers. Proceeds to tell them that they need to just convince all of us to opt out of insurance, pay the fee for not having insurance, and then just go to the doctor and pay cash out of pocket because it's easier and that's what he does, so it's better. Now, this was not by any means a company filled with wealthy employees. I'd say the average wage was maybe $12 an hour. So telling his entire staff of people barely scraping by to pay cash out of pocket without insurance is like telling a homeless person to just buy a house and get off the street, because obviously it's just that simple. Still to this day, the biggest reality check I think I've ever had about people who live in their own little fantasy of wealth up in the clouds. Story 44. Myself, my father, who's poor and divorced from my mom, who's wealthy, bought us a trip to a wonderful beach town 1,500 kilometers away, meaning he bought plane tickets, rented a car, rented a house, bought enough food to feed my brother, me, and my stepmother. He did all this while earning a crap salary, because, yeah, family time is that important to him. He probably worked for years for this trip. That was the last vacation trip he ever did in his life. Being the spoiled rich kid I was back then, the day before the trip, I called him and told him I didn't want to go. He was like, "What?" And I was like, "Yeah, I don't feel like going." In my 15-year-old mind, it was no biggie. Now I realize I probably owe him something like $3,000 just because of that. He never asked me to pay him, and I never did. I feel bad to this day, but I only realized how much of an idiot I was until I became an adult. Having a wealthy family doesn't automatically make you a jerk. It's just that you don't see the value of money. Sims, like everything, is free. There's no respect for money because you don't need to earn it. And to change that, I had to become an adult and meet people who are not wealthy. At first, I found it weird that their entire lives revolved around dealing with the cost of things. I would get mad at my friends when they could not go to X concert, X club, X bar because they didn't have the money. I couldn't understand. It took me a while to get it. Story 45. Most of my old high school was rich people. I was most likely one of the poorest people there. To clarify, I'm not saying I'm poor. My family isn't doing bad, we're just not rich. Upper middle class, I'd say. But the people at my high school were something else. It goes from people just casually buying a pair of shoes for $20,000 to the insane birthday gifts that some people get. About half the people would come to school in designer clothing every day, with a jacket that alone probably cost more than everything I owned combined. They got picked up from the airport in a rental Maybach or Bentley, went to 5-star hotels every vacation, and completely crazy shopping sprees every other day. The thing is, for them that's normal. A lot of them can't imagine staying at a youth hostel because you have to save money. My graduating class was planning to have a graduation trip to Mykonos, Greece. They wanted to rent a villa for like 15 of us, which was like $120 per night. I had to fight hard not to have to do that because I could barely pay half of that. Basically, they literally cannot imagine stuff like road tripping in a car, which you then also sleep in / sleeping at cheap hostels, camping, choosing a specific date to fly home on because flights are cheaper. Oh, yeah, that's one. I study abroad from where I used to live / my family lives, praise scholarships, and came home for winter break. I had to fly on very specific dates because they were by far the cheapest. My friends asked me stuff like, can't you fly one day earlier / later, change flights, etc.? Like, no, I can't pay that much extra money. I could keep having short little rants about this forever. Story 46. So, a friend of mine that I drifted apart from came from oil money. Nice guy, but clueless about life in general for normal people. One day while we're having a beer, he tells me and a buddy how he joined the Premier Golf Club, but since he was a young professional, he got a discount on the initiation fee. When I asked, well, what's a discount, he said that he just dropped $35,000 for the first year, and the rest of the fee could be paid next year, which was another 5-figure sum. Needless to say, I was dumbfounded, but he wasn't bothered by the amount. He's been laid off twice from 6-figure jobs, and it's no big deal in his mind. The last time he was laid off, he didn't even go home to tell his wife or call her to say, hey, this happened. He went and played a round of golf at the above-mentioned course, went for some drinks, then chilled with his friends, before finally coming home late to be like, guess what, honey? He couldn't figure out why she was mad when he told me this the next day. The same friend also recounted to me how the family dog broke its back when they were in middle school, and they paid for the dog to be airlifted to have spinal surgery by some dog spine specialist. I could go on with more stories, but I'll wait to see the reactions I get. Story 47. My high school was, still is I guess, fairly prestigious as far as high schools go. Every third person's parents were doctors or architects or something well paid at least. This one guy's dad opened a shop and he, the son, would come into school with boxes of sweets he had stolen from the shop and hand them out in an attempt to buy friends. He would then try to slag off random people in the class for whatever physical attribute he thought was worth slagging. One day, he decided to go around class and just sound off everyone's slagging name. When he got to the quiet girl in the class, having had enough of his bullcrap, I walked over to him, grabbed him by the throat, and told him to shut the F up, and he never said another word. For about a week. Then, whenever he tried to start up again, I would just give him a look and he'd drop dead in his tracks. A couple of years ago, I heard he moved to America and opened up a restaurant somewhere in the South. Apparently, it was wiped out by Katrina. On the nicer side of the coin, I went to school with the daughter of someone semi-famous, and she was the nicest person you'd ever meet. Her parents brought her up well. Hadn't realized until that point, but I had known her all through school, from primary 1 to 6th year, and hadn't said a single word to her. That's how quiet she was. Story 48. My family and I went to a tourist resort in Colombia, and the attractions had fairly long waiting lines. So me, my wife, and our 14-year-old daughter were lined up to ride a Western-themed train/roller coaster. Almost right in front of us was a gaggle of Arab women with one girl and 3 boys of between 6 to 10 years. The Arab women were in their early 20s, and they had their, I guess, Philippine nanny with them. Her comparably cheap dress and shoes made her really stand out from the crowd. From the print on the shirt of one of the boys, I guess that group was from the United Arab Emirates, and clothes, accessories, shoes, and cell phones screamed stinkin' rich. In my time, I've seen a few unruly kids. The little girl was shy and sweet, but the 3 boys were havoc unleashed and totally out of control. Utter, unadulterated Sith spawn. Screaming, running around, bumping mercilessly into bystanders without any courtesy, while the Arab women, at least one must have been the mother, didn't give a damn about it. No, the nanny had to deal with it, but it was clear that she was totally out of control as well. When she got a call on her cell, she picked up, and from the way she talked, it must have been with family or a loved one from the way she behaved. The oldest kid came over with a smirk, kicked her in the shin, pried the cell phone out of her hands, and must have flat out hung up the call out of spite. For the next 20 minutes, until their turn to enter the roller coaster wagons, the nanny tried to get her phone back. Obviously, she wasn't allowed to give the kid the deserved smacking or could use loud and stern words. From the looks of it, she wasn't even allowed to touch the brats, so it was a constant silent pleading, while that spoiled brat gleefully tumbled through her phone, making sure to keep it tantalizingly out of her reach, and on several occasions, he even tossed it to one of the other kids, who, luckily, managed to catch it without dropping it. When the line had moved up, the female roller coaster attendant gestured the gaggle of them into the first car. 4 seats each, 3 women and the little girl into the first car, the 3 hellspawn boys and the nanny into the next car. That left one of the UAE ladies. She hopped into the next car, but started screaming when the roller coaster attendant tried to seat a young Colombian couple and their daughter with her. She was furiously tattering off in Arab, spit flying and gesturing wildly, making clear that she wouldn't sit with them in the same car. The female roller coaster attendant only argued once with her in Spanish, basically told her to sit down and shut up or get the F out of the car. The whole crowd in line started catcalling and clapping when the roller coaster attendant sternly pointed them all to the door. The Arab ladies kept arguing with the boys, throwing a tantrum, but then security showed up and guided them out. Not just out of the attraction, but out of the park, as we could see during our own ride. The icing on the cake? The nanny's face when she stepped out of the wagon. The hint of a satisfied grin was hard to miss. Finally, someone had stood up to that entitled pack, and that must have made her day. Story 49. Rich mate at uni flipped his sports car during our first week at uni. He just called a cab and left the car there without calling the cops. 1 week later, he showed up with a brand new Porsche GTR. He also bribed the head professor at a prestigious business school to write a lot of his papers. First time I realized that once you hit a certain amount of money, like billionaire, not millionaire, you can basically do whatever the hell you want. There's rich, and then there's rich. To his credit, he was a funny dude and never really bragged about money or wealth. He just had it and used it to enjoy life. He donated part of his allowance even though he didn't have to. I also had another friend who I believed to be middle class for 5 years at uni. She drove a Toyota, lived in a normal flat, and didn't wear outrageously expensive clothes. Only found out her parents are Japanese billionaires in our last week at uni. Her mom was probably in the top 5 or 10 richest people in Japan. She told us she just wanted normal friends, and that's why she never said anything. Story 50. This might not be what you're expecting to hear. Anyway, when I was a kid, I met this rich neighbor kid who lived in a freaking mansion really close to my humble house. As expected, his parents were never home and his babysitter was there almost permanently, so she was like his second mom. He would come over with her to play with my cheap dinosaurs, and he would bring his expensive toys and would brag about having everything he wanted, and he had the best, most expensive toys. Technically the truth, but I didn't mind at all. I got to play with them as well, lol. The more I knew this kid, the more I understood their crappy situation. He would treat his babysitter almost literally like a slave, bossing her around and hitting her, either punching her in the body or kicking her in the legs whenever she wouldn't do what he wanted. She would sleep in a little corner of the dog's room where it smelled like crap. My mom talked to the kid many times, telling him he must not treat her that way because she's the only one that takes care of him and that she should sleep in a proper room. After many talks, the kid started to change for real. Stopped treating her bad and started to say please and thank you, and didn't get mad when he was told no. Maybe a bummer, but nowhere near his previous response. The kid even talked to his parents and insisted that she has a decent room for herself, and they accepted. We ended up being good friends, and thanks to my mom, he was so much better. My take is he just didn't know better thanks to his crappy parents. Sometime later, I moved and never saw him again. I hope what my mom taught him stuck to him. Story 51. Went on a private school mission trip to Costa Rica, and on Thursday, the last day we were supposed to be there, the local volcano had a pretty major eruption. The leaders of the trip explained to everyone that they would probably not be able to get everyone out until Monday. Chaos erupted, as we take these trips the week before spring break, called Minimester. People were mad. I listened as an oil magnate's son and the son of a well-known former NFL player began talking about calling their lawyers to sue the school and the organizer of the trip. Other girls cried about not having an entire week for Vail, while one worried about missing the kickoff to her cruise. Students were calling their parents and begging for earlier flights home, even though these could also be canceled for Ash. About 50% of the trip was trying to book alternate accommodations, and I definitely heard private jets mentioned more than a few times. If you fly when volcanic ash is present, the engine can explode. The earliest people got out Saturday at 10 p.m., after getting to the airport at 5 a.m. for their original flight. I got out on Sunday morning at 1 p.m., due to having cystic fibrosis, a life-threatening lung disease. When I got back, my lung function had dropped 30%, and I spent my entire spring break in the hospital. Fun tidbit. After we got back, it was found out an orgy was had amidst the chaos of finding out flights were canceled. Among other things, private schools looked down on. As we had a 24/7 conduct policy, the trip resulted in 2 expulsions and about 10 suspensions. Story 52. Went to a private college in California, and my freshman year, first semester, somehow I found myself as semi-homies with the son of one of the most iconic television/movie people in our time. He was filthy rich, like billions rich. He was a kind dude too, with no bad intentions, but had some internal issues with alcohol and drugs and stuff. Drove him and a couple of my other buddies to the mall one time. We went to Best Buy where he casually dropped $4,000 on a new Xbox, games, a new TV and stuff, followed up by $1,500 on cologne at one of those side stands, lol. He just splurged on everything as if to fill a void, but never really seemed happy. He was an alright looking dude, but because of whatever was going on, he had a hard time with chicks too. Saddest part was he never finished the semester, ended up going to rehab, and never really heard from him since. It was a worldly experience that made me think differently about money and happiness. Story 53. This kid in my town was super high and pulled in front of a motorcycle, killing the two people on it and leaving their kids without parents. His dad is some sort of local doctor, so a lot of people seem to think he's going to get out of it. He wasn't even arrested. Within days of it happening, his parents sent him on vacation in the Caribbean so he wouldn't have to face anyone in town, and then they sent him off to start med school. His friends in the car all testified he had been smoking blunts and driving erratically, yet his defense attorney, some jerkhead named Ray Shalter, is a hired gun arguing the cheapest bullcrap to get the kid out of any trouble. The defense attorney got some bullcrap aerospace engineer or something from Cornell to come to court and testify. I think it's possible the motorcycle could have been going 60 plus mph, and therefore blaming the dead people. Meanwhile, New York State police investigators had already gone over that crap, obviously, and deduced the motorcycle was doing between 35 to 40 mph, speed limit being 40 where it happened. Also, the defense attorney is trying to claim because the kid was 18, he was an inexperienced driver and the, quote, road conditions were confusing. I grew up near there and am on that road about every single day. It's a flat and straight road. There's nothing confusing about it. It's as basic as it gets. It's just such effing garbage. This kid killed two people, and the witnesses in the car with him testified he was under the influence and driving erratically. But because his dad is a rich doctor, he'll probably get nothing and move on with his life. Defense attorney Schlather's daughter was killed in a car accident like 15 years ago. It seriously makes me happy. I can only hope everyone he cares about meets the same fate. I hope it happens to him, and I wish I believed in God and hell so I could hope that he burns there. This attorney is also representing Thomas Clayton, who paid to have his wife murdered. I get that a defense attorney's job is to help their client, but F this dude. He's just trying to get paid while getting terrible people off the hook. The jerkhead doesn't have to accept every effing case, especially in a small town like this. You're going to have to expect backlash. And he isn't even from this town. He does nothing for it at all and has no connections here. He just rides in to protect garbage and then leaves. And then the family of the kid. The greasiest looking scumbags I've ever seen. They have the most punchable faces ever. I really hope something truly terrible happens to them as well. They deserve nothing but the worst for the rest of their hopefully short lives. So this is a frustrating story to read for sure. It's a shame that like when someone has money, they're able to kind of buy their way out of legal ramifications. I do think OP here maybe pushed it a little bit too far, saying that he's glad and happy that the lawyer's daughter died and he hopes that everyone in the family dies. That's a bit much. You know, we don't need to be doing all that. Story 54. My friend is a great guy and very friendly / accepting of people regardless of income. He's from a wealthy background, but you wouldn't know it kind of thing. He's pretty down to earth. We were scheduling a summer vacation to the beach because that sounds awesome. And I'm thinking, all right, I may have to take a day or two off work to prep. I come from a low-income family where a beach vacation involved going to Myrtle Beach on a Friday after work and coming back mid-Sunday because you could only afford a 4-star motel for one night. Anyway, so I'm like, okay to plan ahead. What dates are you thinking of going? I figured I would need a couple of weeks to ask for time off at work. He gives me a range of 10 to 12 days. I say, okay, do you know which of those days? All of them. He was planning on a nearly 2-week beach vacation. Note, we're just out of college. I got work, student loans, rent, etc. I can't vacation for that long. It took some explaining, but then he realized it wasn't normal to do that. He would go on multi-week vacations to other countries with his family as a kid, so it was normal. To me, that's strange given we got 1, maybe 2 vacations to the budget beach a year and had to plan for a month saving up to afford it. Story 55. Girl in my class got a car for her 18th birthday. As a side note, in Germany, you couldn't get a driver's license before turning 18, and it isn't that normal to get a car at a young age. So this girl, Jay, is the only child of a rather dumb mother and a wealthy and arrogant father. Her dad told her that if she passes 10th grade, she'll get a car for her 18th birthday. She doesn't pass and gets mad, but she's still 17 and couldn't drive anyways. Fast forward to the second time in 10th grade. It isn't that hard and quite doable, but Jay doesn't want to learn. She completely ignores the teachers because they don't treat her like a princess. School year ends and she turns 18. Her dad wants to wait for a week to see if she passed. She screamed at him in his Porsche right in front of the school that she deserves a car anyways, because if he doesn't buy her a car, he doesn't love her. So he buys a regular BMW 3. She hates it. A week later, the results come back and she didn't pass, and her dad argues with her. She starts crying that he's the worst dad ever and that she didn't pass on purpose because she knew that he will buy the cheapest car he could find. The next school year comes by, and I walk past the school, and she drives a completely remodeled BMW with a custom pink paint job and her effing name and glitter on the doors while doing grade 10 for the third time. I'll remind you of the side note. It's so irregular that a kid in grade 10 is allowed to drive that there's not a single parking lot. She had to park in the teacher's parking lot. A few years later, she should overtake her dad's company and almost completely ruined it in a few months. Her dad had to come back home from his retirement vacation to save his multi-million company. Story 56. I heard of a guy who got an Uber to travel about 500 meters from a little shop outside his school to where his next class was. There were dudes, myself included, in middle school who dropped the laptops their school rented out to them, and then would shrug off the damage, saying they'd just let their parents pay for it. One of my best friends paid the equivalent of around 60 USD, a crap ton in the third world, for a set of clay figures at a school auction. He was in middle school, about 6th or 7th grade. They were a present for his sister in France, though, which was nice of him. "I'll just get my driver to fetch me" wasn't an uncommon phrase among people. I know several college-age friends who spend about several $100s every summer and winter for Steam sales. Careful about hanging around that area. There are scholars there. The word for scholars the guy used referred to government aid scholars. The guys who came from poorer families but got government stipends to go to higher education since they were smart. Although I've never seen it, I've heard rumors that some of the 0.001% take helicopters to school, landing in the soccer/track field. Yeah, I grew up in a pretty privileged place. I'm not ashamed of it. My father got to where he was through honest, hard work, and he's the typical, I used to walk 5 kilometers to school every day after feeding chickens and pigs. I only really figured out, bit by bit, how privileged I was through the internet, which was my best friend a lot of the time growing up. Still, I'd like to hope that my family and most of my friends find out how lucky they are. It's good to be down to earth about these things. Story 57. When I left school, I worked in construction as a laborer for a while. One of the jobs I worked on was for a really wealthy farmer who was renovating a manor house that he owned. I got friendly with his kids when I worked there, who were around my age. I suppose that these were not your stereotypical rich kids. They were not spoiled by any stretch of the imagination. In fact, I got to know them because they were sent to help us out in their spare time. I got really friendly with the daughter, still am to this day, and while she was down to earth, friendly and hardworking, I don't think she had much of a clue how other people outside her world lived. The manor house stood on a hill overlooking a valley. At the end of the large garden, there was a development of stunning executive-type houses, 4/5 bedrooms, massive gardens, all of them detached, all of them with Mercs, Range Rovers, and Jaguars in the driveways. She was trying to give me directions to something once, pointed at these houses and said, "It's just past that council estate." Council estates in the UK refer generally to low-income housing. Think projects in the US. I raised an eyebrow and asked her what she thought the houses were. "Oh, they're council houses. They're for people who can't afford to buy their own homes." Not a rich kid being a douche by any stretch of the imagination, and this was a girl who was never spoiled, but the exchange made me laugh. Had she seen the house I lived in at the time, she would have probably thought I was a refugee or something. Story 58. Had a friend who always had collections of things. When I first met him, it was Pokemon cards. He had them all. He'd buy individual cards to complete his collection, even if they were $50 plus when we were in 7th grade. It seemed normal to me. He used them a lot, and his family had money, so it was fine. Then he collected wrestling cards. He had them all. Again, spending a ridiculous amount of money on them. Granted, we used them all the time, so it wasn't that weird. Then he got into action figures, but he would just put them on a shelf, out of the box. Again, not that weird. He would get entire series of McFarlane toys, and once a new series came out, he'd get them, even for things he didn't like. Then he started getting into music, and buying entire collections of artists. The Beatles, U2, then started making playlists of the #1 hits for each year and decade, buying the artist's album, even if he hated them. Then, when he was done with the album, ripping it to the computer, he just boxed them up and shoved them all into the basement. He did it with movies, then guitars, then animes. A lot of things he'd get, he would have previously made fun of me for liking. It wasn't that he had the money to buy all these things, or that he would buy them. It would be that he would just get into something, then be an expert on it, which wasn't weird in and of itself if he's obsessive. It was that it would just happen and he'd get them. He also had everything handed to him and was constantly being a jerk to his family and friends, the few he had, even into his 20s. I moved away when we were in our early 20s, but he's still doing the same crap. He definitely had some problems that were ignored and exasperated by having unlimited money. It made him turn into a real prick. His redeeming quality is that he could be insanely funny, and he had all these things that I enjoyed using. Had a loving family that would give me experiences I would have otherwise never gotten. He was just completely out of touch with what middle and middle class life was like. No financial responsibility. He probably spent millions of dollars prior to being 25, none of which he did much to earn. Story 59. I'm from the Rust Belt, but worked at a summer camp in Minnesota for a summer. A kid from California was also there working. His parents did some type of software development or something. The camp worked by having overnight employees who would rotate nights on and off. So you'd wake up and get to your camp classes by like 9 o'clock, then everyone except the overnight kids would leave at like 4:30. Then you either remained on the clock until 10 o'clock or you didn't. The paychecks were about to be more than I'd ever gotten paid before, but when you worked out the hourly rate, it was like minimum wage. The job was great, and it was hardly work. When we got our first paychecks, the kid was like, "I don't understand. How's this all I got paid? Where'd the rest go?" And I was like, "Well, they took this much out for taxes." That same night, he bought a plane ticket and flew home to California and didn't tell anyone he was leaving. He was so mad about how much came out in taxes that he just left. Didn't tell anyone. I don't think he'd ever worked a minimum wage job before. Story 60. I was in a flight and was lucky to be seated next to the emergency exits, which means more legroom. Behind me, a couple in their 30s and their kid that's probably 5 years old, 6 tops. Kid complains that he doesn't have enough room and repeatedly kicks the seat in front of him, my girlfriend's. At some point, the kid asks to go to the bathroom and his mom brings him. As they walk back, the kid notices that we, in the row in front of his, have a lot of room. So he stands right beside us, really close, and asks his mom for us to move. She tells him to be polite and go sit, but the kid insists and starts talking to us. Kid, can we switch seats? Girlfriend, hello, well, no, we can't, but next time you fly, maybe you'll be lucky to be seated here like we were today. Kid, I really want to sit here. That can't be worth much. Mom, give them 100. Girlfriend and I, jaw drops violently. The mom didn't seem surprised at all that her kid said that, so I guess that was usual. We just laughed it off and went back to chit-chatting, and the kid gave up and went back to his seat, but kept rambling about how unfair it was, and that 100 euros was probably a big deal for people like us. Story 61. Working for a Fortune 500 company, I was responsible for breaking in the new engineers that came into our lab right out of college. We literally could get the cream of the crop. At first, I did not have anything to do with the interview process. They would show me some resumes and then hire those they deemed fit for the job. We had Ivy League kids and others from every major engineering school in the country, but the one that was the most odd was this kid from Nigeria by way of UMass at Lowell. They had arguably the best plastics engineering program in the US. He worked with me for the first few months. He came to work in a brand new BMW 733i. He was always impeccably dressed. Tailored suits and shirts, $1,000 shoes, etc. He hated wearing labwear like safety shoes and Tyvek suits. Anyhow, we worked together on his first project handed down by the powers that were. He did okay at first, but became increasingly frustrated. One day I asked him if he wanted to go for lunch. He was happy to get away for a little time during the day. Even let me drive his brand new Beamer. Nice car, by the way. We got talking and he was telling me how he was missing home, Nigeria. Apparently he was from an extremely wealthy family. He paid the bill for lunch and we stopped at his house on the way back to work. He wanted to show me around. Holy crap. His house was a mansion with cooks, servants, and caretakers. His parents bought the house for him for a combination graduation and first job present, and he wanted nothing more than to go back to Nigeria to tend to his high-end leather business he started before he went to school in America. He would show me all the shoes he had made from exotic animals like snakes, big cats, etc. He had a pair of boots made from snakeskin that cost $2,000 on the open market. He told me of the countless other shoes and leather goods made from a variety of animals native to Nigeria, and it was all a hobby for him. We went clubbing a few times and money was never an issue. He would spend thousands every night. High-end champagne, food, you name it. And the women, another holy crap. Needless to say, he left the company within a year, never finished his first project. He went back to Nigeria. We affectionately called him the Nigerian Nightmare. I miss that guy. Story 62. This may be quite a long walk of text. Bear with me. I knew these two guys during my first year of uni. The first guy was super rich. SR, a-hole, who I shared halls with, and the other was a guy from my course who we'll call super poor. SP. SP had to travel 6 hours a day to get to uni, as it was cheaper than renting and sometimes he still couldn't afford food. SR had his parents pay off all his loans before even going to uni, only ever drank Grey Goose vodka, had his parents buy him a holiday home in Wales because he got bored. Real rich, entitled crap. SR ordered Deliveroo every single day for every meal. One day, SP comes to my halls for dinner and socializing. Despite me saying I'd cover food costs for SP, he insisted on buying some frozen pizzas. When SR found out we were going to share some cheap oven pizzas, he flipped his crap and started berating SP, saying stuff like, quote, "Domino's would only be 50 euros for the three of us, you cheap idiot." I tell SR to stop acting like a jerk and explain SP's financial situation, and the guy laughs and says something like, "Whose parents don't even give them an allowance of 500 euros a week?" We just stared at him. Never met such an entitled idiot in my life. Story 63. In middle school, there was this guy I had a crush on who's the son of a plastic surgeon. He acted all high and mighty because he was the top of our class. I remember him saying that he'd want to marry a girl with a lot of brothers to ensure he'd only have sons. I didn't have the heart to tell him that's not how it works. Anyway, this dude paid for stuff in the school cafeteria with checks. He'd whip out his checkbook and write the amount for the lunch lady. I'd be behind him in line with a couple dollars in dimes and quarters that I scrounged up from around the house because I wanted a cookie, but my parents didn't give me an allowance and forbade me from buying junk food. There was this one time where we were talking and somehow he started talking about getting his father a birthday present. I asked him what he'd get him, expecting him to say a tie or a pair of socks. Something $20 or less, you know? He said he was buying his dad the newest iPad with 128 gigabyte space. I asked him why he'd do that and why he wouldn't buy himself the iPad and his father would just buy it for himself, since money is hard to come by for 13-year-olds who can't legally work beyond mowing lawns and junk. He said, "Oh, I already have one." There was this other time where we were talking about our parents' professions, and he said that since his dad is a plastic surgeon, he basically gets free surgeries. He had a mole on his face, and his dad removed it like that, along with doing other touch-ups. I felt really self-conscious because I have a mole right in the middle of my cheek. The kid was also a racist, so that was fun, I guess. Looking back on it, I don't know why I had a crush on him. He did a lot of things that were such a-hole behavior. Story 64. An acquaintance grew up with FU money. Their dad started a company whose name you know and whose product you'll use this week. Son was gifted a new Toyota RAV4 for his birthday. It was reliable, insurance was low for a 16-year-old driver, and it had all-wheel drive for their winters. Richie Rich threw a fit because he wanted a Mercedes G-Wagon. His parents told him how ridiculous that was, that he absolutely didn't need a $125K SUV as his first car. The $40K SUV was fine. Later that week, literally the week he bought it, he deliberately crashed the Toyota into another car so his parents, quote, would have to buy him something else. Joke's on you. If you deliberately cause a car accident, you get arrested on the scene, and it takes months and months for daddy's attorney to sort it out, which includes getting your license suspended. Story 65. I went to Baskin-Robbins with a friend of mine, and he only really ate at one ice cream shop near his house. He's never had to pay for the ice cream there because his dad has a tab with the place, since we're always hanging outside, and it'd be troublesome to walk back for money when he can just pay the tab every 2 weeks or so. Well, he thought this tab just extended to all the ice cream shops, because when he was told the total, he stared at it and said, "Wait, I have to pay?" I ended up paying for him, but his dad gave me the money back. still remains one of the funniest things. We're both 16 now, and it still is pretty funny, even if it was 6 to 7 years ago when we were 9 to 10ish. So it isn't like he was an adult or anything. He just lived in a gated community and was a kid with no idea how tabs worked, and that no, they don't extend to every ice cream place. This isn't the worst case I've experienced, but I've always found this time funny. So I made an account just to post it because I think he also has Reddit and I like embarrassing him with this story. Story 66. The worst case would go to my best friend. Back in school, I was not his friend. In fact, I hated his guts. Always made fun of people for being poor, flaunting his parents' money, crap like that. I always avoided him because I myself was in a poor family and I didn't want to fake being a friend of his like everyone else. I felt bad for him because other kids liked him for his money and not him. Well, he effed with the wrong person, me, one day, and I just punched him square in the nose and told him to F off or there will be more. I probably rewired his brain because he came to me later that day and apologized for what he said. Like, apologized. I was ready to give him another punch until he said that. Then I just felt bad for him. I just told him everything I thought about him and how much of a female dog he was for letting people fake being his friend just because of his money. He asked me then and there to be his real friend. He cut off ties with other toxic people and hung out with me from then until college graduation. He learned about the peasant life, pretty much. He never flaunted his money anymore. No one knew he was rich, and eventually, a fact that everyone knew became a rumor. I'm glad he's still humble now. He even married to a nice girl who grew up poor. He's more fixated on making sure they never go poor rather than spending what they have. I wonder what his future would be had I not punched him. Story 67. There was a kid in my school whose father was a self-made millionaire, and as a result, this kid was a complete a-hole, as he knew he was the wealthiest kid in our scummy public school and used that knowledge like a superpower to manipulate people into liking him. He would insert himself into groups of friends and then invite only one or two of them to his huge countryside mansion, complete with pool, and turn them against their other friends by buying them video games and CDs. When he got bored of them, he would then move on to other people, leaving a wake of broken friendships in his path. He was also responsible for getting a teacher fired who called him out on his behavior after he drove one girl to take an overdose because she couldn't take the fact that she had been left out of several parties he invited her friends to. His father was on the school board and had funded a new extension to the science building. Luckily, a few of us caught on to his bullcrap fairly quickly and avoided anything to do with him. But what's worse is that karma never really came back to bite him. He was given a comfortable job with his father's company after dropping out of university, and by his mid-20s, he was married to a French model and had his own country mansion. I left my hometown in my late 20s and haven't really kept up with school friends since, but I heard he divorced her a few years later and traded her in for a younger model. Life makes you despair sometimes. It really does. Story 68. Knew a kid who would total a car and it gets newer every time. Brand new luxury model Jeep to a new BMW to a 100K Audi. They also got a 10K Ducati for their first bike and totaled it in under a week. Had another friend who would call their parents for money to go out and get around 1K added to their account for the day. Each day. I hated growing up around kids like these. They had to want for nothing and never had to work. When they grew up, their parents had their future set for them, or simply would pay for anything their hearts desired. I grew up fairly poor and lived homeless on the street for years. It tore me up inside thinking about how these kids would destroy 60K plus 100K new cars like it was nothing, when half that could house and feed me for a long time. It still tears me up inside seeing these kids given everything in life for simply being born into the right family. I was very jealous of how easy everything came to them and how financial hurdles for me that were insurmountable were nothing more than a casual phone call for them. It makes me just want to blow my brains out. So I know it's human nature, but I just want to issue an admonition here. One of the worst things that you can do, particularly as you get older and reach adulthood, is compare yourself and your life to that of other people. You're only going to find yourself falling into these envious patterns, and you're more focused on how good other people have it instead of what can you do to lift yourself up. So this post is a perfect example. Don't worry about what other people are doing. There are going to be people that have more than you. There are going to be people that have less than you. I guarantee you there are people out there right now that would gladly trade lives or financial situations with you. So it's always relative, so just try to keep that perspective. Story 69. I work with kids, and rich kids are always the worst behaved. Currently in working with a third grader who constantly breaks things and gets new things immediately. Every month he throws his brand new iPhone out of anger, and within 24 hours it's replaced with a brand new one. Thousands and thousands spent on phones. Same with laptops and computers. He'll smash huge TVs out of anger, and they're replaced within days. In the past 2 years, he's seen the musical Hamilton 4 times, and just last week he told me, "Last time I went, tickets were only $200. That's so cheap." And I looked at him dead in the eye and said, "That's still too expensive for me." When he acts up, they rush to quiet him with stuff like his 3 electric scooters he screams about hating. So then they rush out to get him something else to play with that he'll inevitably cry about hating and then break. Money and its actual worth mean nothing to this kid, and he's already an abuser with serious entitlement issues. This is why I'm child-free. Too many a-holes raising a-holes. Providing for your child is important, but there's a whole list of things required to raise a healthy, stable person, and money is at the bottom of that list. Story 70. I used to work in drug and alcohol rehabs, like super baller, celebrity, politicians, executives, etc. rehabs, and wow, do I have some stories. Anyway, I can't tell you how often kids would come in and have no idea what to do. One kid in particular didn't know what a washer and dryer was. We had to teach him every step. First, he just put his clothes into the washer and waited. Didn't turn it on, nothing. Then he did the same with the dryer. Kid never knew where his clean clothes came from. One of the places was $75K a month. We had some Middle Eastern royalty come in and he rented an entire wing of the facility. I believe it was 6 rooms total. Oh, and he had to pay for the 2 bodyguards that stood at the entrance to the wing. I will also add that there are 2 different kinds of rich kids. Those who have a lot of money and know they do, and those who have so much money they don't even know different. One is really effing annoying and the other you kind of feel bad for. The kids that knew how much money they had would do things like threaten to buy the treatment center and fire you if you didn't do what they liked. The ones who didn't know any better would say things like, "Why don't you just get a new car?" Or "Why don't you just travel to XYZ?" It didn't register that having 3 cars by the time you're 18, BMW, Mercedes, and Land Rover in that order, wasn't normal. Another story that I just thought of, sort of unrelated to this, was about a kid who kept buying these designer bags, just one after another. We couldn't figure out how he was getting the money. His parents assured us that they were not giving it to him, so we decided to search his room. I opened a drawer and it was full of adult diapers. Turns out he was doing Skype shows and acting like a baby, crapping in his diapers and then selling them. Story 71. An old roommate apparently had a credit card with a $3K monthly limit that his parents paid off, and fancied himself a digital artist. I'll admit, some of the stuff he made was pretty cool to look at for up to 5 or 6 minutes. He played guitar in his Marshall half-stack, but never actually really practiced. I once overheard a phone conversation between him and his dad, where he kept telling his dad to shut up and listen. He was the best digital artist in town, and if he didn't get the brand-ass new MacBook Pro with 17-inch display and the dedicated graphics, etc., his career as an artist might as well be over. He was in one of the top schools in the country for business. He also neglected the crap out of his long-haired cat, all black and already kind of mean, because his old roommates used to treat him like crap. I met the old roommates. I don't think any of them had hurt a cat. And let his fur start forming dreadlocks. And since he's an outdoor cat, he started getting burrs and gumweed all stuck in his coat, which made him meaner. Myself and all the other roommates constantly urged Rich Boy to take care of his cat because the cat started attacking us. To such he would commonly scoff and say something to the effect of, "He's my cat and I say he's fine." Also drove a lowered Impreza that his parents bought and outfitted for him because his show car, airbag Jetta, was so slow that it got wrecked being put onto a tow truck. Story 72. Not rich kid syndrome, but just the craziest case of holy crap, that person's the most filthy rich I've ever seen. One was my dad, has some property in way upstate New York. He's building a small house on it, doing all the work himself, and one day I was helping him and he said he wanted to take a walk to see the house being built just over the hill. So we tuck it through the woods and go check it out. We crested that hill to one of the largest houses I think I've ever seen. My parents' actual house could fit in the courtyard of this place, and their house is 2,500 square feet, which is quite the large house. I almost thought they were building a small school till we talked to the neighbor, and he informed us it was just some filthy rich guy from NYC. Number 2 would be when we did a job at a CEO's house who was in charge of a very, very large credit card company. The house in and of itself looked relatively normal for the area from the outside, but it went 3 stories underground, and his garage had that crazy-ass lifting floor that revealed his 2 Ferraris underneath his Bentley and murdered out Rover. There was constant security detail on the house, decked out with all the fixings. These guys looked like they were Secret Service, and we had to have background checks to get in. Story 73. 1st through 7th grade for me. I went to a private school during those years and was quickly deemed as unpopular since my parents weren't doctors, lawyers, etc. Since I couldn't afford to come to school, mind you, this is second effing grade, decked out in full Abercrombie/Hollister for casual Fridays, I was disliked by most. My best friend from 1st through 3rd grade finally disowned me in 4th grade, since he was coming under fire for being friends with the poor kid. Thing is, my family wasn't even poor, just middle class. Average 2-story house and taken care of by my single mom. She worked in insurance and had the mortgage paid off already before even sending me to school. Even the administration started getting in on it, and I got sent to the principal's office multiple times for, quote, not having enough dress clothes/shoes. The principal also gave me detention on many occasions for this, and even more so when I had longer hair and a pierced ear in 7th grade. Boys weren't supposed to have piercings or hair longer than the top of their ears per the dress code. I finally got my mom to agree to transfer me to a public school in 8th grade, and instantly made lots of friends due to my personality alone. And that's why I will never send my kids to a private school. It just encourages toxic and elitist behavior in 1st graders. Granted, this all occurred in the 90s, so things are likely much different now. Story 74. Taught at a high school that had a lot of kids like this. One girl missed like half of the school year because she was traveling around to do equestrian competitions. When confronted with the fact that she was considered truant and her grades were horrible as a result, her dad just cut a big donation check to the school board that made the problem go away. For her 16th birthday, her parents bought her a brand new, loaded Jeep Wrangler that cost about $45K. A month later, she was driving drunk on her way back from a party and crashed it into a lake. They bought her a brand new and even more expensive Ford F-150 to drive around in after that. Had another kid at the school who was the only child of 2 lawyers. He was always inviting kids to his family's lake house to party on the weekends and walked around being a total turd to everyone around him who didn't suck up to him, including teachers and other students. He got busted selling drugs, including cocaine, at the school, but his parents also made a big stink and he suffered no consequences besides them taking his platinum card away. Somehow, he still miraculously always had thousands of dollars in cash on him at any given time after that. Story 75. My freshman year of college, there was a guy on our floor from a South American country who said his dad was some big oil executive or something. He came to school in Colorado because he wanted to be close to the ski slopes his family had visited so often growing up. I can't think of any one particular moment where his rich kid syndrome shone through. He was just generally kind of an ass and bragged a lot. I remember once he bought a can of beer off someone else on our floor for like $50, just because at first he was reluctant to sell it, so the rich kid just jumped right into a ludicrously high number he knew no one would refuse. Then there was a time my friend and I were out walking on campus, and he drove his expensive sports car through a corner of the plaza, which was very much not intended for motorized vehicles. He saw us, laughed, revved his engine, and then drove back toward the road. He really wasn't too bad. He could at least be friendly, in that pushy, hey, we gotta be friends kind of way. No idea what happened to him. Can't remember seeing him again after our sophomore year. Story 76. Can I answer this question with the best case of rich kid syndrome? I went on a trail at camp. We were sleeping on wooden planks with sleeping bags. We cooked all our own meals, peed in the woods, didn't shower for 2 weeks. I'm a very outdoorsy person, but it was actually pretty rough. There was this one kid from Paris, and we had no idea he was rich until we saw him attempting to do dishes, and he clearly had no idea what he was doing. He apologized and said he had butlers that did that stuff for him at home, and he didn't know how to do dishes, or laundry, or clean, or really anything at all. We were around 16 at the time. He didn't ask us to do it in place of him. He asked us to teach him how to wash dishes properly so he could continue to help. We didn't hear a single complaint from this kid about the dirty, uncomfortably and tiring situations we were in for 2 weeks. His house apparently cost like $7,000 per square foot, or yard maybe, I don't really recall, and was mansion-sized. When his mother got bored with her wardrobe, which was weekly, she would just send him out to buy her a new Louis Vuitton or YSL bag, which ranged from $1K to $10K. And he had butlers that did everything. Not house staff, not cleaners, fancy-ass French butlers. He was extremely polite, didn't think any less of any of us, eager to learn, and was very socially adept. Although so many rich kids were absolute idiots when it comes to social interaction. Just an all-around great guy. Story 77. I'm late to the game, but will add my stories. They aren't as wild as some of the ones I read, but oh well. Both my freshman year roommates were wealthy. One was grounded and nice. The other roommate was either a bit more oblivious or liked to flaunt her wealth. Her dad paid for all 4 years of our expensive private university tuition in one check. This was 2005, so it would be way more today, but it was about $120,000 for all 4 years. The part that bothered me the most is that they saved money by paying for all 4 years at once, as they were able to lock into the 2005 price, where my tuition, about 95% loans, went up every year. Oh, and the kicker is she's the oldest of 4, so I'm guessing her parents would also be able to do this for her younger sisters. Near the beginning of the school year, as we were getting to know each other, we were talking about the areas where we grew up, and what stores were at the malls near us. Roommate said, for department stores, we had Saks, Nordstrom, Macy's, but I'm not including Sears or JCPenney. People who shop there have herpes. At one point, she decided she had way too many clothes and had to get rid of some of them. Her guilty pleasure was Abercrombie, which was cheap clothes for her. She was putting a bunch of, not so old Abercrombie clothes in a garbage bag. A friend on the floor was there and asked her if she was going to donate the clothes, and she said, no, poor people don't wear Abercrombie. She just threw them out. She got a Lexus on her 16th birthday. Her dad was a plastic surgeon, and she got a nose job when she was 16. I saw a before picture, and she definitely did not need one. She actually had very poor body image for a pretty petite girl. I think a lot of it stemmed from her dad's profession and other family dynamics. While we never got along, and I wish I didn't live with her, I did really feel bad for her. I'm pretty sure she thought I was poor, and I grew up very middle class, but I don't think she realized that middle class people shop at JCPenney and drive their mom's old station wagon as their first car. Story 78. This might not be as interesting, but I had a classmate who was really rich. First week of class, they had a different bag every day. Every time they were wearing something, it was branded. Shop so much at high-end brands, they've memorized the layout, expensive side of the mall, and every summer or school break, their family would go outside the country. One time we were talking about brands, and they go, oh, I love Gucci chocolate. I ate 5 of them in Italy. My dad is friends with the owner. I once asked how many countries they've been to and got, I don't know, it was a lot. They frequently bring up their trips in various parts of Europe and Asia. Last year, they went to Universal Studios, and this year, Japan, in VIP tickets to Blackpink concert so far. Their couch costs as much as biology students' tuition for 1 year. They had a room full of overseas large-size snacks with 2 coffee makers and 3 microwaves. Their father has already planned their future as taking over his company. Classmate was a good person, very generous. We'd go on surprise trips to places and they would pay for everything. Every time they bought something to eat, they would share with everyone, even when no one asked. They were really humble, even ate street food and enjoyed public transportation. They weren't really spoiled, just used to the rich life to the point that they're often unaware. Good thing they're not used to being pampered, really confident and helpful in group projects. They're very independent and often takes initiative. They had family problems, though, and was secretly cutting themselves. I hope they're doing well. Use the gender non-specific pronoun they for extra anonymity. Sorry if that threw you off. Story 79. So this is about my former best friend, M. His dad is a lawyer with his own firm, so they're all filthy rich. My mom does not work at all. She just shops all day and rides her 3 horses. They have a housekeeper. My friend went to college for free, and so did his younger brother, because the father footed every single penny. They have 3 houses throughout the U.S., 1 in Mexico, and over 5 vehicles. They live on a private ranch in the mountains in California. Despite all this, I was best friends with him, and his mom adored me, mentored me, and let me ride her horses with her every Sunday. However, after 4 years, I ended the friendship. He finally started to show his true colors, and some information came to light that made me sick. So, while I loved his mom, she constantly babied him, he's 26, and assured him he could do no wrong and is just an angel, even when he lied to me, his best friend, and our whole friend group. Touched one of our girlfriends inappropriately when she asked him multiple times to stop. I just recently found this out. And then did the same to me, and then played victim when we all decided to stop talking to him. He acted like he was a gift to humanity, and when we confronted him on his actions, he blamed all of us. His move on me happened in early April of this year, and I immediately ended the friendship. It was highly inappropriate. We were alone, and it activated my PTSD from a previous incident with my dad. I'm engaged, he had a girlfriend, and my fiancé was one of his best friends. His mom finally unfriended me on Facebook just this week after over 3 months of not speaking to him. Story 80. Just for some context, I'm currently completing a level 3 extended diploma in IT at college. In the course of the first year, the class basically got split up into 3 categories: the hardware guys, the software guys, and the complete morons that you just have to wonder why they thought picking IT was a good idea. This kid in my class saved up for months for a MacBook. This kid could only be classed as one of the morons, and as much as I hate Apple and their business practices, I was happy for the kid. This kid spent months working for this MacBook. Again, I hate Apple with passions due to their business tactics and generally crappy behavior, but if there's one thing I hate more, it's Windows OEMs that overcharge for mid-tier systems. Anyway, this other kid decided that seeing this meant he wasn't the most tech-savvy person anymore. He's on an IT course without a PC at this point. He's a console gamer, which pissed a lot of the hardware guys off. I'm one of the hardware guys. Upon seeing the MacBook, he immediately went online and found the most expensive laptop he could afford, around 1,700 euros or roughly $2,000. He's one of the kids whose parents let them use their credit card. He then spent 1,700 euros on a laptop with a 6th gen i5, a GTX 1050, and 128 gigabytes of mechanical storage, or for those that don't know, a laptop that's worth about 400 euros at an estimate. The MacBook kid spent 700 on his, which is arguably even worse value when considering the Windows alternatives performance-wise, but this kid worked for it and wasn't very tech-savvy. The other kid claimed to be, but wasn't, and refused help from me and several other people who were shouting at him, telling him it was a terrible deal. In the end, he threw a fit and demanded we help him get a refund and help him find a replacement. I agreed to help, but couldn't bear it for long, so settled for a laptop with a GTX 1070 Ti, an i7 8700HQ, and 500 GB of NVMe storage for 1,100 euros. I hate myself for recommending a laptop like that when I knew there were better deals, but it was 600 euros cheaper and massively better performance-wise than the original, so I settled. The kid was so annoying that I had to settle before too long. TLDR, kid works for MacBook, rich boy gets salty, buys expensive laptop, makes me fix error. Story 81. I go to a prestigious all-girl private school, but I act broke. Most people in that school are ridiculous. They flaunt their riches like branded bags and jewelry, bully other students they see as below them, etc. The funniest thing is that one of our school's founders' values is simplicity. Our teachers were not impressed, and they know that those who are truly rich or well off, or even just comfortable, have no need to flaunt their money. True, because the girls who are the most brands, which don't even go together or match, are those who think they don't have enough money to be popular or liked. Little do they know that the most popular girl in that school, who's nice and very humble, who doesn't need brands to be liked and relies on personality, is already working to make her own money through helping her mom with business. This girl was so humble that during our graduation, she only wore her bracelet that her mother gave to her. She told me that day, money isn't everything. To survive and be successful in this world, you have to struggle. Then she told me how she helped her mother in business, how she didn't ask for money from her parents, etc. This girl turns out to have cancer and a year later died during Christmas time. Her favorite thing to say, which was almost always, "I'm broke," because she knew people would be fake to be her friend. And no one asked for money, because no one pays. The ones who said they were rich. Story 82. I don't know that it's all that bad relative to some here, but my aunt and uncle are very well off and are paying for my cousin to go to whatever school she wants for as long as she wants, master, PhD, etc., which is fine, whatever. However, I'm paying mine out of pocket, so I take 2 or 3 classes a semester and, in the past, took a couple semesters off simply because I couldn't afford it. Snob cousin told me I was just being lazy and didn't want to work hard at school, so that's why I took the semesters off and only take a few classes at once. She's almost 23 and has never had an actual job. The job she currently has is a pizza shop ran by my other cousin and uncle, and she has no schedule. They literally don't even know when she works or how much she makes. Whenever she has free time, she can show up, mostly just to Snapchat herself singing whatever song the employees are playing. And when she leaves, she, quote, just takes some cash out of the register instead of a paycheck. Story 83. Been traveling with one in a school group for the past 2 weeks, in Japan. It was hell, got back today. She doesn't seem to begin to fathom that people are different from her, and not even in just a monetary way. She clearly judges the people who went to like anime, and when I said I was just wearing earplugs because I have anxiety, her response was, oh, she has a convertible. She just got her license. Every word out of her mouth is either a humble brag, something judgy about other people, often things that people in the group do/have, something mildly racist or disrespectful towards religion, again, study tour in Japan, this is at shrines and crap, or just some complaint that literally anyone who wasn't rich experiences regularly that she's upset about, because it's a school group. Sorry, not everyone in the group can afford whatever crap you want. She decided for the group what we were doing twice because she would speak louder than the rest of us, and by the time we could manage to get an effing word in, she was already walking off to wherever she wanted to go. She said when looking at Japanese calligraphy done by monks that it was messy and that, quote, she could do better if she really tried. She would also regularly hold up our group, along with a few other girls, but it was probably her influence, by a few minutes when we had places to go with things like shopping or just not doing something when we were supposed to because she didn't feel like it. And then got pissy when my teacher started reminding her to do the stuff / what times we were meeting. I was so close to snapping the whole time with her. JFC.